Picture this. It is close to midnight. A guy just like the ones who bring your takeout is finishing his last order of the night. The streets are almost empty. The strip malls are dark. And his phone is the only thing still glowing in his car. The app tells him there's a faster route. No streetlights, no houses, no signal for a few miles. Just a narrow black road cutting through trees that look the same on both sides. He takes it anyway. 10 minutes saved. One more tip. One more quiet drive home. By the time he pulls up outside a perfectly normal suburban house, everything feels like it is back to normal. Warm porch light, a Ring doorbell, a middle-aged woman in a hoodie thanking him for coming so late. He is tired, distracted, just wanting to hand over the food and get off the clock. He does not mention the empty road. He does not mention the moment his tires hit something that was not asphalt. He does not mention the scream he thought he heard from the trees. He does not have to, because as she signs for the order, her eyes slide past his shoulder, toward the curb, toward his idling car. And she asks, in the most casual voice in the world, "They let you guys bring someone with you now? That's smart, with how late you have to drive." The app says he was alone the entire time. He knows he was alone the entire time. So who did she see sitting in his backseat? If you end up reading this on your channel, you can call me Mark. That is not my real name, but it is close enough that it still makes my stomach tighten when I type it. I am writing this from a small, one-bedroom apartment in a mid-range complex in the Poconos, with the lights off except for my laptop screen. And for some reason, that detail feels important. It is 1:17 a.m. exactly. I know that because the clock on the stove behind me just clicked over with that cheap plastic sound it makes, and my cursor has been blinking on a blank email for long enough that my eyes are beginning to burn. I have started this story 3 times already tonight. I deleted it twice. The third time, I sat here for 10 minutes with my fingers on the keys and my brain doing that thing where it replays something in a loop until you half wish it had never happened and half wish you were back there just to prove it was real. The room I am in is not scary. I need to say that up front, because the last thing I want is to dress this up like a campfire story. This is not a cabin in the woods or a basement with a flickering bulb. It is a perfectly average upstairs unit in a building with beige siding and way too many identical cars in the parking lot. The carpet is stained in the corners. The walls are thin enough that I know my neighbor 2 doors down falls asleep to the same late-night talk show almost every night. Right now, I can hear the hum of the fridge in the little kitchenette to my left, cycling on and off with a soft click and a low drone. The central AC for the whole building pushes out a steady, distant rush through the vents that sounds like white noise you pay for on an app. Somewhere above me, pipes tick as somebody's shower cools down. Every so often, the elevator at the end of the hall dings, and I hear the doors open and close, followed by footsteps that get louder, then softer, then disappear behind another door. There is a cheap wall clock over my TV that makes a noise for every second it kills, and right now, that is the loudest thing in this apartment. Tick, tick, tick. This is the soundtrack I fall asleep to almost every night. It never bothered me before. Tonight it does, because none of it is what I notice first anymore when a room goes quiet. You have probably read a lot of emails from people who say, "I am not trying to scare anyone. I just want to get this off my chest." I am not sure which category I fall into. I am not trying to submit a creepypasta. English is my first language, and I could still never make fiction sound as insane as what my own memory is doing to me. At the same time, I am not going to pretend I do not know what kind of channel I am sending this to. I have listened to you read other people's stories while I clean this very tiny kitchen, or while I lay on this same couch, telling myself that what I went through was not that strange, that other people had it worse. I am 33 years old. A couple of years back, when this happened, I was newly divorced, behind on everything that matters in adult life, and working late-night food delivery around the Poconos for an app you definitely know, even if I do not want to name it. DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, pick one. They all blur together after a while. I did not grow up thinking, one day, I will be the guy bringing other people's Friday night dinners to their door. Up until the pandemic, I had what people around here would call a real job. I did shipping and receiving for a distribution center just off the highway. Then hours got cut, then shifts disappeared, and one day I walked out with a cardboard box that did not have pizza in it, no matter how much it felt like a bad joke. Delivery work started as temporary. The pitch is easy. Work when you want, log on, log off, no boss watching you every second. What they do not tell you is that flexible is just another word for you can drive yourself into the ground on your own time instead of ours. I started doing afternoon shifts, then late evenings. Then I realized that tips were better at night, traffic was lighter, and being a nameless car in the dark started to feel safe. That is the messed up part, I guess. I got comfortable being invisible. People saw my name in an app, maybe glanced at my face for 2 seconds through a screen door, then went back to their lives. No one remembered the guy who dropped their wings on the porch at 11:45 p.m., except maybe when they complained about the sauce being wrong. Out there on the roads, with the radio low and the glow from my phone telling me where to go next, I had this illusion that nothing bad could really touch me, because no one really saw me in the first place. I am telling you all this so you understand why I agreed to take a route that I had already decided I did not like. Not that night, not that late. There is a road out here called Old Quarry Road. If you plug in an address on one side of town and your customer lives on the other, the app almost always paints that road bright green as the fastest route. On a map, it is just a line that cuts a neat diagonal between two larger highways. In real life, it is a 2-lane strip of cracked asphalt that dives straight through a patch of woods with no houses, no mailboxes, no streetlights, and almost no cell reception. In the daytime, it looks like the kind of place kids in pickup trucks go to drink warm beer and spray paint things they should not. At night, it looks like the world forgot to finish loading that part of the level. The first time I drove it, I told myself I was being dramatic. Trees are trees. Darkness is darkness. It is just a road that saves you 10 minutes. I still remember the way the app estimate dropped from 19 minutes to 8 the second I turned onto it. Like the map itself was relieved I had made the right choice. I joked to another driver later that week that Old Quarry Road was shaving 10 minutes off my ETA and probably years off my real life. He laughed and said it was fine. The cops never patrol there anyway. That sentence sits differently in my stomach now. While I am typing this, I keep stopping to listen, which is stupid, because there is nothing in this apartment that has not been here all along. The fridge kicks off, and for half a second, the silence is loud enough that I hear my own pulse in my ears. The AC compressor clicks and rumbles back to life, and I jump like an idiot. Someone's car outside chirps as they lock it, and the sound of the alarm arming travels up through the thin walls exactly like the little electronic beep my own car made the last time I checked the back seat 3 times in a row. I pay attention to sounds I never noticed before, because that is how that night started to unravel. Not with something I saw, but with the way the usual noises on a lonely road stopped lining up with normal explanations. The rhythm of tires on pavement, the way a scream carries between trees, the difference between a body hitting a car and debris rolling under the chassis, the story you are probably waiting for, the one with the shortcut, the scream in the woods, and the thing in my backseat happened on Old Quarry Road. But this is the part that I have deleted twice already tonight. That was not the first time that stretch of asphalt felt wrong. It was just the time it finally convinced me. If I am honest, I think I had seen the man in the hoodie before that night, just not on the road. If you have never done delivery at night, it probably sounds a lot more dramatic than it really is. Most of it is just waiting, staring at your phone in some dim parking lot while the app pretends it is thinking about whether you deserve another order. Refresh, refresh, watch the little circle spin. When it finally pings, that stupid soft chime might as well be a slot machine paying out. $8 to bring someone nachos, $12 to carry their Friday night guilt in a paper bag. You start to crave the sound. My nights usually started in the back lot of the strip mall that held one of the pizza places I partnered with. Out front, it looked exactly like every other chain. Neon sign, big windows, teenagers waiting for takeout. Out back, where drivers actually lived, it was concrete stained with old grease, a dumpster that always smelled like wet cardboard and tomato, and a metal door that slammed way louder than it needed to. Inside was our break room, if you could call it that. A narrow space with buzzing fluorescent lights, a coffee machine with a cracked glass pot, a fridge full of Tupperware labeled with other people's names and dates, and a wall covered in safety posters nobody read. You learn to live between places. 1 minute, you are under the too bright lights of a Walmart parking lot, watching people push carts in slow motion under the cameras. The next, you are weaving between chain restaurants and gas stations. The same brands repeating like a pattern in a cheap video game. After that, maybe you turn into a quiet cul-de-sac where every house has the exact same porch light and the same Ring camera eye glowing beside the door, and you have to dodge a kid's bike somebody left half on the sidewalk, half in the driveway. The smells come home with you whether you want them to or not. My car never stopped smelling like cardboard and garlic and cooling grease. Some nights, the whole cabin filled with marinara and buffalo sauce, hot and sharp, until I had to roll the window down just to breathe something that did not come out of a fryer. Other nights, it was sweet, melted ice cream, spilled soda, layered over that permanent background scent of my own worn upholstery and cheap pine tree air freshener that never quite did its job. You get used to the physical feel of the job, the way a stack of pizza boxes slides forward if you brake just a little too hard, the way plastic bags thump against the side of the seat when you take a turn more aggressively than you meant to, the weight of a drink carrier in your fingers as you walk across a dark front yard, praying you do not find a sprinkler head with your ankle. It is stupid, mundane stuff, but it all becomes part of how your brain knows what normal feels like. Money-wise, it is always a slow bleed. rent due on the 1st, child support folded in like a quiet threat you actually agree with, but still feel bitter about when the app gives you a $4 base pay for a 20-minute drive. Car insurance hanging over your head, knowing that if you total this rusting Honda, you do not have a backup plan except maybe begging rides off friends who stopped answering your texts as much after the divorce. Late-night orders are where the real tips are. People feel guilty about eating at midnight. They overtip to balance the scales. Saying no to a far delivery, especially a big one, feels the same as pulling money straight out of your own kid's mouth. That is why you keep going even when you are tired. That is why you ignore the knot in your stomach when the map turns green down a route you do not like. That is why you worry about your rating like it is a medical condition. One bad night of cancellations and the app starts sending you less. Too many declined orders and you get flagged. It is amazing how fast a grown adult can become afraid of a cartoon number dropping from 4.9 to 4.7. I started paying attention to sounds because of the car. At first, an old engine talks to you. A new rattle here, a squeak there, the way the brakes hiss, or the whine of the power steering when you take a tight corner. Those are little messages that say, you can keep going a while longer, or this is going to cost you everything next month. When the road is dark and the radio is low, you hear every vibration. You learn what is yours and what is not. That is probably why that first weird moment stuck with me, even though I tried hard to forget it. It was a couple of weeks before the old quarry night. I was parked in the gravel lot of a small church, the kind that looks like a white box with a steeple dropped on top. It sat off one of the quieter roads, and I liked to pull in there between orders to stretch my legs and check my phone. It was a Tuesday, I think. Cold enough that my windows fogged a little while the engine idled. I remember the way the yellow security light over the side door buzzed, casting everything in that sick, sodium glow. My app showed nothing nearby, so I was scrolling through messages, half reading an argument thread with my ex, half ignoring my own reflection in the dark screen. Everything was boringly normal until I heard footsteps on the gravel behind my car. They did not start far away and come closer. That is the part that bothered me later. It was like they materialized out of nothing, maybe 4 or 5 yards behind the bumper. Slow, deliberate crunches of shoes on small stones. 5, 6 steps, and then they just stopped. No engine sound, no door slamming, like someone had just gotten out of another car. My hazard lights were off. My brake lights were off. If anyone else had pulled in, I should have seen it. I froze. My hand hovered over the lock button, even though the doors were already locked. I stared at the rearview mirror, expecting to see a shadow move, but all I got was my own eyes reflecting back at me in the dark, wide and stupid. The glow from the church light behind me made the entire lot visible in this fuzzy, pale cone. There was nothing in it. No cars, no people. After a few seconds, I rolled the driver's window down halfway, the motor whining softly, and leaned my head out to listen. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own engine idling, and way off in the distance, a truck passing on the main road. No more footsteps, no scuffing, no breath. If someone had been there, they either stopped moving completely or stepped off into the grass and vanished. I told myself it was my brain miscounting echoes. Gravel does weird things with sound. Maybe a stray dog, I thought. maybe the wind. I did what everyone does when something brushes against the edge of their comfort zone. I filed it under creepy but explainable and went back to staring at my phone. By the time the app finally pinged with a new order, I had almost convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. Almost. Looking back, what sticks out is not just the footsteps. It is that the pattern of them, the way they arrived, then stopped, and left me hanging in that sharp, silent question mark, felt exactly like something I would hear again later on Old Quarry Road. Only louder, only closer, only with far more riding on whether or not I turned my head. There was one more small thing that should have told me the road had its own ideas about me. A few nights before everything went bad, I was sitting in the pizza place break room, sipping burnt coffee and waiting for a run. My phone buzzed with a new offer, and the app flashed a tiny map. Restaurant, blank. Just a gray bar where the name should be. Drop off. A set of GPS coordinates out in the familiar patch of green that I knew was the stretch near Old Quarry Road. No customer name, no items. Base pay, $0. Before I could even process it, the offer screen vanished. Order no longer available, it said. Gone like it had never existed. I laughed about it with another driver later, showed him the screenshot I managed to grab, joking that even ghosts want delivery now. We made cracks about phantom customers and glitchy servers, and then forgot about it. I still have that screenshot in my phone. It is just a smudge of gray and green with a pin dropped in the middle of the woods and an empty white strip where the restaurant name should be. Back then, it was a funny little tech hiccup. After that night, every time I scroll past it, it feels less like a joke and more like an invitation I did not realize I had already accepted. If you pull up a map of this area and zoom out far enough, Old Quarry Road looks harmless. From above, it is just a narrow gray line connecting two wider yellow ones, a neat little diagonal that makes the app very happy. You do not see the parts that actually matter from that height. You do not see how the world changes the second your tires roll off the main road and onto it. In real life, Old Quarry is barely a road at all. The asphalt is old and cracked. The center line faded down to a ghost of yellow you can only spot when your headlights hit it at the right angle. It is just wide enough for two cars to pass if both of you suck in your breath and hug your own side. On the right, for most of the stretch, there is a shallow ditch filled with muddy water and trash that washed in from storms. On the left, the land falls away just enough that if you slide off in the dark, no one will see your car from the main road. Someone spray painted crude initials on the guardrail near the worst part years ago, and they are still there, flaking and pale, like a signature on a bad idea. The trees are what get to people, I think. They are tall and old and planted too close together, roots pushing up under the pavement, so the surface is never truly flat. In the daytime, their branches knit overhead into something that almost looks pretty in a scenic route kind of way. At night, those same branches become a tunnel. Your headlights paint moving shadows across trunks and limbs, and your brain starts inventing shapes in the gaps. The sky is still up there somewhere, but from inside the car, all you see is a ceiling of black branches that looks like it is draped directly over you. There are no houses on Old Quarry, no mailboxes, no driveways, no porch lights in the distance. If you see a light through the trees, it is either someone else's headlights or something you do not want to think about too hard. There is one crooked sign at the start that warns about reduced shoulder, and another halfway down that says falling rock. But no one has bothered to replace the bullet-peppered speed limit sign in years. The first time I heard anything about the road, it was from a cashier at a gas station where I used to grab coffee. He was one of those guys who looks permanently bored until you accidentally say the password for whatever his favorite topic is. For him, it was accident stories. We were talking about roots one night, me mentioning I was thinking about taking Old Quarry to shave some time off a long run, and his eyes flicked up for the first time in the whole conversation. "You running food down there?" he asked, like I had said I was jogging through a minefield. "Yeah," I shrugged. "App likes it. Says it's 10 minutes faster." He shook his head slowly, slid my change across the counter. That used to be a quarry truck road before they shut the place down. No lights, no shoulder, couple of bad wrecks back in the day. They took the danger signs down, but the road didn't get the memo. He smirked, like he wanted to see if I would laugh. When I did not, he added, "Cops hate going out there after dark. No signal, no shoulder, no room to turn around. If someone calls from out that way, they pray it's a prank." I told myself he was exaggerating. That is what people do in gas stations late at night. They layer on local color like extra cheese. But the next time the app turned that stretch green and told me it was the fastest way, I remembered his face. I took the long, well-lit way that night. I did not every night. I had my own rule for Old Quarry. If it was raining, if I was already tired, or if it was after midnight, I tried to avoid it. But the app does not care about your private superstitions. It only cares about distances, time, and money. When you choose the slow way, the little ETA number turns from happy green to disappointed yellow. Your on-time rate drops a fraction of a percent. The system nudges you with a notification about optimizing routes. And you, with your overdue bills and your invisible life, start to feel stupid for caring about your nerves. Most of the time, when I broke my own rule and took Old Quarry, nothing happened. Just trees, dark, and the sound of my tires humming. That is how fear gets worn down. Not by being proven wrong once, but by being proven overdramatic 29 times in a row. Then there are the other times. One of those was a rainy night in late October, a couple of weeks before the incident I am really writing about. The weather had gone from drizzle to full-on sheet of water in the space of one delivery. My wipers were going on high, thunk, 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 squeaking slightly every time they hit the farthest edge of the windshield. The road was shiny black, reflecting my own headlights back at me, and the trees looked like they were melting at the edges. I was halfway down Old Quarry when my phone buzzed with a text from my ex about a schedule change for my daughter. I knew I should not, but I pulled onto the shallow part of the shoulder where the ditch was less steep, just enough to get the car further from the center line. The rain hammered the roof, drummed on the hood, slapped at the side windows. I put the car in park, left the engine and the wipers running, and leaned forward to read. For a minute or two, all I could hear was the rhythm of the wipers and the soft blow of the heater. Then beneath that, I heard 3 dull knocks from behind me. They were not sharp, not like someone rapping their knuckles angrily on metal. They were muted, like fist to trunk through a layer of water. Thud, thud, thud. Even through the rain and the engine, I felt them more than heard them, as if they traveled up through the frame of the car and into my spine. I twisted in my seat, heart suddenly busy. The back window was a blur of water and reflected light. The rearview mirror showed nothing but smeared red from my own brake lights. I flicked the mirror down, unbuckled, and turned all the way around, half expecting to see someone's face pressed up to the glass. Nothing. Just the vague shapes of my own delivery bags and the outline of the rear headrests. The knocks did not repeat. The wipers kept sweeping, relentless. Eventually, I did what I always did. I forced myself out into the rain. I stepped around to the back of the car, shoes splashing in the thin film of water running along the edge of the road. My taillights threw red across the empty wet asphalt. There was no one there. No other car pulled over. No footprints on the muddy strip between the shoulder and the ditch that were not mine. When I got home later that night, curiosity chewed on me enough that I pulled the dash cam footage off the SD card. I scrubbed to the point where I remembered stopping. On the little screen, through the wavering gray of the rain, my car sat lonely on the side of Old Quarry. No other headlights appeared. No figure approached from behind. No shape moved in the reflection of the rear glass when the knocks should have happened. The only sound the camera picked up was rain and wipers. I told myself it was junk on the road. Maybe a branch under the bumper shifting. Maybe something in the spare tire compartment settling. Cars make strange noises in storms. That is the thing about little alarms in your head. You can always smother them with a reasonable story if you try hard enough. The trouble is, I did not smother them. Not completely. They just stacked up, one by one. The footsteps in the church lot, the ghost order with no restaurant name, the knocks on the trunk in the rain, like tiny red flags tossed into the backseat of my memory. I kept driving, kept delivering, kept choosing speed over comfort, and those flags rode with me, whether I looked at them or not. Tonight, sitting here at 1:17 a.m. with the fridge humming behind me and the building breathing around me, I am finally writing about the one time those flags were not tiny. The night the app turned Old Quarry Road green again, and I followed it, and someone stepped out of the trees like they had been waiting for me ever since that first glitchy order pinned a spot in the woods. The night this story takes place, I took Old Quarry Road because a stranger's pizza was more important to me than a stranger's life. At that moment, I just did not know which stranger yet. The night that everything finally stopped being probably in my head did not start out any different from 100 others. It was a Friday in late fall, the kind where the air feels thinner when the sun drops and your breath hangs just long enough under streetlights to remind you winter is circling. I remember checking the time on my phone as I slid into the driver's seat, a little after 7:30 p.m. The sky was already a flat, dark blue, the kind that never quite turns into real night because of all the reflected light from town. My mental checklist clicked through automatically. Full tank of gas. I had topped off at the station with the bored cashier and the two bright overheads. Phone at 90%, cord plugged in just in case. Extra napkins shoved into the center console. Delivery bags stacked in the trunk, their insulated sides permanently smelling like every sauce known to man. It was the kind of night you tell yourself will be good money. People tired from the week, not wanting to cook, happy to tip if you bring hot food to their door fast enough. The pizza place I was anchored to that evening sat in a small strip mall, just off one of the main roads. In the row of storefronts, it was wedged between a Chinese takeout joint with faded pictures of food in the window and a nail salon where the last blue open letters were still flickering as someone swept the floor inside. The parking lot was a patchwork of old oil stains and fresh tire tracks, lit by a handful of tall lamps that hummed quietly and threw yellow light over everything. That strip mall was its own little planet on Friday nights. The pizza place door never really stopped opening. People came in waves, teenagers in hoodies, parents in work clothes, a guy in scrubs rubbing his eyes, a woman in leggings, and a giant hoodie with her hair pulled through the back of a baseball cap. On the far side of the lot, a convenience store's neon signs glowed red and blue, promising lottery tickets and cheap coffee. Every time the door swung open, you could hear the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the faint beep of scanners. My app was already logged in and waiting on the dash. It vibrated with a new order as soon as I parked, and for the next hour or so, the night settled into the usual rhythm. Small runs to apartment complexes with broken buzzers, where I had to call up and wait for someone to throw the door open from the inside. Townhouses with barking dogs, owners yelling, "He's friendly," while the animal lunged at the end of the leash like it wanted to test that theory. A motel off the highway, where the guest cracked the door just enough to shove money out without turning on the light behind them. The room smelling like stale smoke and something sweet and chemical. I remember the things I always remember. Neon open signs buzzing quietly above darkened sidewalks. Gas stations humming with that ever-present white roar of coolers and fluorescent tubes. The way the world seems strangely clean under all that artificial light, even when you know better. I remember the way my own car felt under me, that familiar rattle at 35 miles an hour, the way the steering wheel vibrated slightly on rough patches, and the slide of boxes and bags as I braked. Nothing about the first half of that shift would have made it into a story. It was just America on a Friday night, one endless loop of lit windows and glowing screens. Sometime between 8:30 and 9 hot, the rush slowed enough that I found myself back at the pizza place, the kitchen heat hitting me like always when I pushed through the back door. Inside, the floor tiles were just a little sticky from flour and spilled soda, and the air was thick with tomato sauce, melted cheese, and the yeasty smell of dough proofing in metal pans. The overhead radio sat on a shelf near the soda fountain, playing some classic rock at low volume, a song I had heard so many times it had become just another piece of background noise. My manager, a guy in his 40s with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and a baseball cap he wore backward, was leaning over the make table, joking with one of the younger drivers about a customer who had ordered a large pizza with no cheese and no sauce. "So, bread," the kid had said, and everyone laughed harder than the joke deserved. Laughter is a currency in those spaces. You spend it as fast as you can. The receipt printer near the register rattled and spit out thin white paper every few seconds, orders piling up in a little cascade that someone would eventually slap onto a metal rail above the prep station. Another driver sat on an upside-down bucket in the corner, thumbs tapping on his phone, the light from the screen reflecting in his tired eyes. I washed my hands, used the bathroom tucked beside the walk-in cooler, and splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, under the hellish fluorescent light, I looked older than 33. The kind of tired that does not come from one bad night of sleep, but from years of small decisions made for the sake of money and other people's convenience. I was leaning against the stainless steel counter near the soda fountain, letting my shoulders unknot for a second, when my phone vibrated in the front pocket of my apron. Not the sharp notification ding of a random app, but the distinct buzz pattern of a new delivery offer. I pulled it out and glanced down. The app screen showed a big stacked order: multiple pizzas, 2 orders of wings, a couple of 2-liter sodas, maybe breadsticks. The total ticket amount made my eyes flicker automatically to the payout estimate. Base pay plus distance bonus. And if the tip was even half decent, it would be the best single order I had seen all night. The drop-off address was a quiet suburb on the edge of town, a place I recognized from other runs. 2-story houses, trimmed lawns, everything relatively calm after 9. For a moment, it looked perfect. The kind of anchor order that makes the whole shift feel worthwhile. Then my eyes slid to the estimated delivery time, that little number the app loves to turn green. It was tight. Not impossible, but tight. The route summary showed what I already knew. If I stuck strictly to the main roads, it would be close. If I took the shortcut, I could slide in on time with minutes to spare. I accepted the order without really thinking. Fingers do that on their own when the amount looks good. The app chimed and immediately started drawing a path from the pizza place to the suburb, the usual blue line across the digital map. As it did, a small weather icon popped up in the corner of the screen. Curious, I tapped it. The local forecast showed a band of fog moving in from the north, visibility dropping later in the evening. The timeline for that little gray cloud overlay lined up almost exactly with when I would be driving. I felt something in my stomach tighten, a little twist that did not match the warmth of the kitchen or the joking voices around me. I flicked back to the route. One of the other drivers, the same kid who had laughed at the bread pizza order, glanced over my shoulder. "Big one?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "out by Maple Ridge." He whistled low. "Nice. You gonna take Ghost Road?" He said it casually, like a nickname everyone used, and maybe they did. I had heard a couple of variations: Old Quarry, Ghost Road, The Cut. He grinned, expecting me to roll my eyes. I tried to. "Depends if I feel like dying tonight," I joked back, but my voice came out flatter than I meant. On the screen, the map flashed green, the app gently highlighting Old Quarry Road as the fastest route. A little notification banner slid down. Saved 10 minutes with this optimized path. Like it was doing me a favor. The radio in the corner shifted songs, the guitar riff scratching in the air like a needle dragged across old vinyl. The receipt printer spat out another order. Somebody yelled, "Behind!" as they squeezed past me carrying a stack of boxes. The whole place smelled like heat and comfort, and things people want when they feel safe at home. And there I was, staring at the word fastest hovering over a stretch of digital gray that I knew, in the real world, was nothing but trees pressed in close, and a road that had already told me more than once that it didn't care if I believed in it or not. I laughed along with the jokes. I nodded when my manager tossed the printed ticket at me and told me to make good time. But when I slid my phone back into my pocket, the knot in my stomach did not go away. That was the last truly normal moment of that shift. I pushed through the back door of the pizza place with my shoulder, and it swung shut behind me with that heavy metal rattle it always made, like the building was exhaling me into the night. The warmth and noise of the kitchen dropped away all at once. Outside, the air was colder, sharper, carrying the familiar smell of dumpsters to the left, and, underneath that, the faint chemical tang of whatever they used to power wash the concrete. Beyond the edge of the lot, past the thin line of scrub trees, I could hear the distant roar of the highway, a constant, low rushing sound, like an ocean you could never quite reach. It made everything in the strip mall feel like a little island floating in the middle of endless traffic. The overhead lot lights flickered once as I stepped under them, a quick dim and bright that made all the shadows jump an inch to the side. I told myself the ballast was going bad. They did that sometimes. Still, I walked a little faster toward my car. My Honda sat 3 spaces from the back door, exactly where I had left it, parked under one of those lights. The paint looked dull and tired, streaked with dried rain and dust. I popped the trunk and the doors with the fob and heard the familiar double chirp echo off the brick wall. The interior lights blinked on, revealing the clutter I lived out of. Old delivery bags, an extra hoodie, a half-empty case of bottled water rolling around in the corner. Inside the trunk, the insulated bags were already open, ready to swallow someone else's dinner. I grabbed the first stack of boxes the cook had handed me, 3 large pizzas in grease-spotted cardboard, and slid them carefully onto the passenger seat, wedging them against the backrest at a slight angle. On top of that, I balanced a drink carrier loaded with 2-liter bottles and a plastic bag rustling with sides. Experience had taught me where the tipping point was, literally. The car creaked slightly as I settled behind the wheel. When I turned the key, the engine coughed once, then caught, the dashboard lights blooming to life in a familiar mix of soft oranges and cool greens. The speedometer needle jumped up and then dropped back to 0. The radio flashed its station frequency for a second before settling back into a faint murmur of some late-night host talking about traffic and weather on the 10s. I clipped my phone into the mount on the windshield, just to the right of the steering wheel. The app was already open, the new order pulsing gently on the screen. When I hit start, the map snapped to a 3-dimensional view, a little blue arrow blinking over the pizza place, and a glowing line stretching out toward the suburb on the edge of town. Turn left on Main in 300 feet, the navigation voice said, in that calm, synthetic tone that did not care whether you were exhausted, broke, or scared. It just assumed you would obey. For a moment, I did not move. I let the engine idle, feeling the faint vibration through the steering wheel. I reached for the defroster, flipping it on. The vents hissed softly as warm air began to crawl up the inside of the windshield, chasing away a film of moisture. My hand rested on the gear shift, but my mind slid somewhere else. I thought about my daughter, probably asleep by then at her mom's place across town. I pictured the nightlight in her bedroom, the one shaped like a cartoon cloud. The last time I had dropped her off, she had held my sleeve for an extra second and asked when I was going to get a job where you do not always smell like fries. I had told her, half joking, that I was going to fix everything in 1 more year. 1 more year of long nights and weird houses and back roads, and I would be caught up on the things I had fallen behind on. You say that kind of thing enough, and it stops sounding like a plan and starts sounding like a spell. 1 more year, 1 more big order, 1 more shortcut. The money in this last run would not change my life, but it would nudge the meter on a few invisible gauges. The balance on a credit card, the gap between rent and my checking account, the number of times I could say yes when my daughter asked for something small. That was the real reason I took big orders, no matter how late they came in. Not because I loved the job, but because saying no felt like stealing from my own future. I flipped on my hazard lights for a second before backing out, just in case one of the other drivers whipped around the corner behind me. Inside the car, the sound of the blinkers was loud and artificial. Tick, tick, tick. A metronome for every decision you make behind a wheel. I checked my mirrors, looked over my shoulder. The lot was empty, except for my car and a couple of employee vehicles parked closer to the door. The radio droned quietly. Talk radio. Some guy ranting about local politics in a tone that was supposed to sound outraged but just made him seem tired. I reached out and turned the volume down until the words blurred into a faint, meaningless murmur. I told myself I wanted to be able to hear the road better. Really, I just did not want anyone else's voice in my head. The defroster hissed, the windshield clearing fully now, and beyond the glass, the lot light stood haloed in a faint ring of moisture. The glow made everything look softer, like the edges of the world had been smudged with fog before it even arrived. My hand went to the gear shift again. Before I moved it, for no good reason, my eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw movement in the back of the car. Not a clear figure, not a face, just a shadow shifting in the narrow strip of glass. A darker shape among the already dim forms of the headrests and delivery bags. It was like watching someone lean ever so slightly from one side to the other in a theater seat behind you, just enough that you register them without really seeing them. My fingers clenched on the wheel. A pulse of cold shot through my chest. I snapped my eyes off the mirror and turned in my seat, twisting around to look back directly at the rear seats. The dome light overhead glowed a weak yellow, showing me exactly what should have been there. 2 stained gray headrests, one sagging hoodie crumpled on the seat behind the passenger side, and my spare insulated bag half unzipped, its silver interior catching the light. No movement. No one sitting there. I stared for an extra heartbeat, listening. The only sounds were the soft idle of the engine, the faint murmur of the radio, and the patter of some stray leaf skittering across the lot outside. My heart sounded louder than all of it. I faced forward again and blew out a slow breath I did not realize I had been holding. The security lamp over the back door of the pizza place threw odd shadows across the inside of the car sometimes. I knew that. Light bouncing off the glass, off the chrome, doing things your brain thinks are people. I had been primed to see something there ever since the church parking lot, ever since the knocks on the trunk. Paranoia, I muttered, more to myself than anything else, and forced my hand to move the shifter into reverse. In the corner of the windshield, my phone's map still waited patiently, that little blue arrow representing me. Turn left on Main in 300 feet. The digital voice repeated, as calm as a nurse calling your name in a waiting room. I checked my mirrors one more time, this time refusing to look too long at the back seat. Then I eased my foot off the brake, let the car roll back, and pointed the nose of the Honda toward the road and the thin, glowing line that led everywhere I did not yet know I should avoid. The first few minutes out of the lot felt like any other run. I pulled onto Main, merged with the thin stream of Friday traffic headed toward the center of town, and let the routine settle over me like an old coat. Street lights marched along both sides, painting everything in a repeating pattern of light and shadow. The neon signs I had already seen once that night floated by in reverse order now. The liquor store with the buzzing red letters, the diner with the fake chrome, the 24-hour pharmacy with its too white interior glaring out at the dark. My phone sat in its mount, glowing quietly. The navigation line traced a familiar path for a few blocks, then split. A small banner slid down from the top of the screen with the options. Main roads. 21 min. Yellow. Optimized route. 11 min. Green. On time. I didn't need to tap anything. The app had already chosen. The green line angled away from the safe, well-lit arteries and cut straight across the map toward the blank space I knew was Old Quarry Road. The blue arrow that represented my car blinked impatiently near the fork, waiting for me to decide if I was going to obey the math or the knot in my gut. I could almost hear my manager's voice in my head. "Make good time on that one, Mark. Big tip if you're fast." I could see the total payout estimate, could feel the weight of my daughter's child support check, could see the red numbers on my bank app. All of it pressed in on that tiny choice between right and left. The light ahead turned green. My turn signal clicked on, the little tick-tick loud inside the cabin. I took a breath, tasted tomato and coffee, and something metallic I could not name, and nudged the wheel to the right. The optimized Route 1. Turn right onto County 7. The navigation voice announced calmly, as if it had not just convinced me to roll the dice on a stretch of road that had already lifted its hand once to knock on my car. Within 2 blocks, the street lights thinned. Within 4, they stopped completely. The gentle hiss of my tires on smooth asphalt changed to a grainier rumble, the sound of old, patched road. The last lit intersection fell away in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the dark, and the glow of town behind me dimmed until it was just a faint haze on the horizon. Up ahead, the mouth of Old Quarry Road waited, marked only by a battered sign with the route number leaning slightly to one side. There were no other cars turning in. There never were. As soon as I made the turn, it was like someone slid the brightness bar on the world down a few notches. My headlights cut a tunnel through the dark, but beyond that hard edge of white, everything was just grades of black. The trees on either side crowded closer, tall trunks rising out of the ditch and the drop-off, their branches weaving overhead into a jagged ceiling that my headlights painted and erased every second. The yellow center line appeared in front of me as a smear, then vanished under the car, then appeared again, thinner, more worn. The road surface was rougher here, and the car felt it. The steering wheel vibrated gently against my hands, every crack and patch sending a small message through the frame. The sound of the tires changed too, less like a hum, more like a low growl. I eased off the gas slightly, without really deciding to. "Continue straight for 3.4 miles, the navigation voice said. It sounded exactly the same as it did in town. That bothered me more than if it had glitched already. In my peripheral vision, the phone screen glowed like a little artificial moon. Every now and then, a reflective road sign appeared at the very edge of the headlight beam, flashed a brief blinding white. Falling rock, narrow shoulder, and then was behind me. The beams caught the eyes of something small near the ditch, maybe a raccoon, maybe a possum, and they flared briefly like coins before whipping away. I told myself to keep my eyes on the road, but the instinct to check the ETA, to see that reassuring green on time, was strong. I flicked my gaze to the screen for a half second. The map jerked. The little blue arrow that was my car jumped backward on the route like the universe had hit rewind, sliding a full inch along the green line in the wrong direction before snapping back to where it should have been. For that brief instant, the estimated time flickered from 11 minutes to 13 to 0, then settled back at 10. The whole screen seemed to pulse, like it had hiccuped. "What the?" I started, one hand hovering near the phone to tap it, to zoom out, to prod it back into sense. Before I could, the navigation spoke again. Only, it did not sound quite right at first. For a heartbeat, the voice was garbled, a slurry of syllables like it was trying to say 3 different things at once underwater. "Con, east." Static crackled through the audio. Then the sound cleared and the voice finished smoothly, back to normal. "Continue straight for 3.4 miles. My skin prickled. The hairs on my forearms stood up under my jacket. It was a navigation bug, obviously. A bad patch of reception. Data dropping out in the woods. That was all. I told myself that, firmly, and tightened my fingers on the wheel until my knuckles ached. I glanced in the rearview mirror more often than I needed to, even though there was nothing to see but my own pale face and the small cone of light behind the car. Every time I looked, my eyes tried to skip past the dark shape of the back seat. I could feel the hoodie I kept back there, like it had developed its own gravity. The radio had stayed on low, filling the car with a background murmur from some late-night talk show. The host's voice rose and fell in the same practiced rhythm, talking about weather systems and high school football scores. It helped a little to anchor me to the idea that somewhere not too far away, there were other people under bright lights, talking into microphones, drinking from paper cups. Then, just after I passed the crooked falling rock sign I always used as my halfway marker, the sound changed. It was not gradual. 1 second, the host was in the middle of a sentence. The next, the speakers spat a sharp burst of static, like someone had ripped the cord out of the back of the studio console. The white noise flooded the small space, loud and flat and all-consuming, the kind that makes your teeth vibrate. I winced and reached for the volume knob. In that fraction of a second, between the burst and my fingers finding the dial, the static shaped itself into something else. I heard, or thought I heard, a sound buried in it, a thin, distant noise that might have been a woman's scream stretched across too much distance, or might have been someone yelling a single word, "Stop!" It cut out so quickly, I could have convinced myself I imagined it. I turned the volume down, and then all the way off until the radio went silent. The sudden quiet felt heavier than the noise had. Now it was just me, the hum of the engine, the rumble of tires on tired asphalt, and the creaks and ticks of an old car pushing through a place that did not want witnesses. The darkness outside the glass seemed to lean in closer, reading over my shoulder as I followed the line the app had drawn like it knew something I did not. I thought, not for the first time that night, about turning around, finding a driveway, backing out of this choice before it carried me all the way to wherever it was trying to take me. Continue straight, the navigation had said, so I did. There is a point, driving at night, where the world shrinks down so much that it feels like you are the only thing left moving in it. That is what Old Quarry felt like in the minutes before it happened. Just me, my car, and that narrow ribbon of road sliding into my headlights and out under my tires. With the radio off, the inside of the car was quiet in a way that did not feel natural. The only sounds were the hum of the engine, the low swish of the tires on old asphalt, and the occasional tiny rattle from somewhere in the dash that I had been meaning to track down for months. My wipers were off now. The moisture in the air was hanging just below the threshold of actual rain, so the windshield stayed mostly clear, smudged only by the ghosts of old streaks. My eyes did their usual pattern. Road, mirrors, road, phone screen. Just glances, checking the next turn, checking the estimated time, checking that the blue arrow was still on the green line. The map showed only the road and a wall of blank green forest on either side. No other traffic icons, no points of interest. I kept telling myself that meant it was safe. At one point, I looked down to double-check the house number for the delivery. I wanted to have it already in my head, so I would not fumble with my phone when I hit the neighborhood. It was a short line of text, black on white. A number, a street name I recognized, a little note about leaving the order on the porch if no one answered. I read it in a second, maybe less. When I lifted my eyes back to the road, the world jumped. A dark shape exploded out of the tree line on the right side of the road, so sudden and so wrong that for a fraction of a second, my brain tried to file it under deer, or fallen branch, or shadow, anything but person. The headlights caught it full on. The outline of a hoodie, the hunched slope of shoulders, jeans, the pale flash of a face turned slightly away, features blurred by motion and glare. Time did that thing everyone always says it does in accidents. It stretched. My foot hesitated for half a heartbeat between the gas and the brake, as if it could not decide which world we were in. The one where the road is always empty, or the one where a man just stepped directly into my lane. Then everything caught up to itself all at once. My leg jerked, and I slammed the brake pedal down so hard my knee screamed. The front end of the car dipped. The seatbelt bit into my chest. The sound that followed is one my body remembers better than my ears do. A heavy, blunt thump from the front, right over the hood, followed by a horrible scrape along the side panel, metal kissing something that was not supposed to be there. Then another noise, lower, almost under my feet, something rolling under the chassis, catching and releasing with a dull clunk. The car lurched, swayed, then shuddered to a stop sideways in the lane. The pizza boxes on the passenger seat launched forward, the top one sliding off and wedging against the glove box. The soda bottles in the drink carrier clinked together sharply, one of them tipping just enough to thump onto the floor mat. For a second, I thought the entire stack was going to cascade into my lap. My hands were welded to the steering wheel. My chest heaved, breath coming in these short, useless gulps that did not feel like they were delivering any oxygen. The cabin filled with the smell of heated brakes and something else beneath it. Something that might have been hot rubber, might have been the ghost of impact, might have been my own adrenaline twisting everything into something metallic. The dashboard lights glowed calmly back at me, the same as they always did. The speedometer needle had dropped to 0. The little engine icon was still off. The fuel gauge sat just under full. If I had taken a picture of the dash, you would not have been able to tell anything was wrong. It was like the car itself had not registered what it had just done. Outside, the road was suddenly too quiet. No other engines, no horns, no distant radios, just the faint breath of wind through the trees, and nothing. My first stupid thought was, maybe it was not a person. Maybe it was a deer. a large branch, something that had broken loose from the ditch. Anything but the shape my brain had already cataloged as a man. My second thought, chasing hard behind it and knocking it out of the way, was, if it was a person, you just hit them. My stomach dropped so hard, it felt like I had driven off the edge of the drop-off. My fingers fumbled for the hazard light button, jabbing it. The cabin filled with the loud, artificial tick-tick-tick as all 4 indicators began to flash outside, throwing orange pulses into the trees like a distress beacon. I forced myself to move. The door handle felt slick under my palm. When I pushed the door open, the cold air that rushed in felt almost invasive after the stale warmth of the car. It smelled like wet leaves and damp earth, and beneath that, just for a second as I stepped out, I thought I caught a faint metallic tang on the back of my tongue. It could have been the brakes. It could have been my imagination already writing blood into the air. Gravel and crumbled asphalt crunched under my shoes as I rounded the front of the car. The headlights were still pointed down the lane, carving out a long tunnel of light that made everything beyond it swallow dark by comparison. The beam caught the silver edge of the guardrail on one side and the ragged tips of some grass in the ditch, all of it too bright, too high contrast. Then, just at the edge of the right headlight, near the front passenger side tire, I saw him. He was lying partly on his side, partly on his back, at an angle that looked wrong without being cartoonishly broken. Hood up, hiding most of his hair. Face turned slightly away, cheek pressed against the rough, damp road. The visible part of his skin so pale it reflected the light. One arm was flung out at a strange angle, elbow bent in a way that made my own joints ache just to look at it. But it was not grotesque, not like the gore you see in movies. It was the kind of wrongness you could almost pretend was just the way someone had collapsed after tripping. I stopped a few feet away, every instinct screaming at once. One part of me wanted to back up, get in the car, drive until the night swallowed this place completely. Another part pushed me forward, the part that knew how this would sound if I ever had to explain it. The part that remembered my daughter's face and thought, what if this were her lying here and some stranger decided they were too scared to even check? My knees bent before I consciously decided to kneel. The rough asphalt dug through the denim into my skin as I went down beside him. Up close, I could smell him under the generic forest smell. Sweat, damp fabric, something sour and human. The hood shadow hid most of his features. I could see the curve of a nose, the line of a jaw with rough stubble. "Sir?" My voice sounded thin and too loud in the trees. "Can you hear me?" There was no response, no flinch, no groan. My hand hovered over his shoulder, fingers shaking. I did not want to touch him. I did not want to not touch him. I needed to know if he was... I did not even want to finish the thought inside my own head. Finally, I forced my hand down and let my fingertips brush the fabric of his hoodie, just below the ridge of his shoulder blade. The contact sent a tiny, unexpected tremor up through my body. The hoodie was damp and cold under my fingers, but as I pressed a little harder, I heard a faint sound that made every muscle in me lock up. It was like the last hiss of air leaving a balloon. A quiet exhale, not dramatic, not gurgling or ragged, just a soft shh, right at the edge of audibility, close enough that I felt it as much as I heard it. I jerked my hand back, heart slamming into my throat. For a moment, I thought he had sighed, that his lungs had just pushed out one last breath, that he was about to roll over, or sit up, or grab my wrist. But he did not move. He lay exactly as he had before, limp and wrong, and utterly still, under the unblinking glare of my headlights, while the hazard lights ticked relentlessly behind me, counting out the seconds in which I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be next. For a few seconds after that faint exhale, I could not think in complete sentences. My brain just hammered the same blunt idea over and over. You hit him. You hit him. You hit him. When actual words finally crawled back into my head, they did not make anything better. Did I kill him? The question came in, cold and clean, like water under a door. It washed out everything else. It did not matter that I had not been speeding, not really. It did not matter that he had come out of nowhere, right out of the trees, in a place where no pedestrian had any business being. The only thing that mattered in that moment was a man lying half under my headlight beam, twisted and silent, with my fingerprints now on his shoulder. The rest of the spiral followed right behind. Why was he in the road? There were no houses, no driveways, no parked cars he could have been walking back to. He had come from the tree line, from that sea of trunks and underbrush and unseen slopes. You do not just end up in the middle of Old Quarry, not at this time of night, not wearing a hoodie and jeans like you had just stepped out of any parking lot in town. How am I going to explain this to the cops? That one landed in my stomach like a rock. I saw it all play out in fast forward. Headlights in my mirrors, questions, flashlights in my face. You've been drinking tonight, sir? A breathalyzer shoved under my nose. Me saying no, and knowing that even if I was clean, there are always ways to look guilty. I imagined the insurance calls, the claims adjuster voice that always sounds bored and mildly suspicious. I imagined letters in the mail with notice printed in red, court dates, fines, maybe worse. I was completely sober. I knew that, but I also knew that in the wrong light, on the wrong night, to the wrong person, a 30-something guy in an old car on a back road with a dead man in front of his bumper is not a hard-working delivery driver with bad luck. He is a problem to solve, a story that gets written without his input. I leaned closer to the body, trying to push all that away. I needed to know if he was beyond help, or if there was something I could still do. The headlights stretched past us into the woods, turning the nearest tree trunks into pale pillars and pushing the underbrush into dense, knotted shadows. A thin veil of fog had started to settle in the low spots, lit up like torn gray cloth by the beams. Beyond that, the forest might as well have been a brick wall. Behind me, the hazard lights continued their relentless tick, 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 each flash throwing our shadows in a different direction. In between the ticks, there were tiny pockets of softer sound. Somewhere out in the trees, a night insect started chirping again, tentatively at first, like it was checking to see if the danger had passed. I swallowed and forced myself to really look at the man I had hit, up close. With the angle just right, I could see more of his face under the hood's shadow. There was beard stubble along his jaw, a few days' worth at least. His skin was very pale, but that could have been the headlights washing all the color out of it. His lips were slightly parted, enough that I could see a thin sliver of dark between them. "Sir," I whispered again, my voice coming out hoarse. "Can you hear me?" No response, no change. I tried again, louder. "Sir? Hey, can you move your fingers if you hear me?" That was something I remembered from some CPR poster somewhere. Ask for small movements. Something easy? Nothing. I stared at his chest, trying to see if it rose and fell. The hoodie's fabric was thick and dark. Any movement would have been subtle at best. My eyes watered from not blinking. If there was a breath, I could not see it. For a moment, the night telescoped down to just the distance between my face and his. The smell of damp fabric and sweat, the way a few strands of hair were stuck to his forehead. The tiny flecks of asphalt dust on his cheek. It all felt too specific, too intimate, for someone whose name I did not know, and whose body I might have just broken. My hand went to my pocket, almost on its own, fumbling for my phone. The screen lit up too bright when I dragged it out, the sudden rectangle of white and color making my eyes flinch. The signal bar in the corner taunted me. One shaky little bar, wobbling between that and no service, as if it could not make up its mind either. My thumb hovered over the 9 on the keypad, then the 1, then the second one. I did not press. My thoughts started splitting in 2 directions. In one version, I called immediately. I stayed on the line. I waited here with him, hands maybe pressed on somewhere bleeding, until I saw the flash of lights coming over the rise. In that version, I did everything right, and whatever came next was at least something I could look my daughter in the eye about one day. In the other version, I tried to drive to the nearest intersection, to where I knew there was better reception, a wider shoulder, other cars. Something in me clung to that idea with ugly, selfish hands. There, I thought, there will be camera footage, street lights, witnesses who will see that I was not some drunk maniac hunting pedestrians. I could call from there and still say I tried. Nobody would know exactly how long I had waited. Nobody but me. There was a third, quieter voice at the back of my head, and I hated it instantly. It said, "If you leave him and he dies while you are driving for help, the time of death is between here and there. If you never make that call." I cut that thought off so hard my jaw clenched. Somewhere under all of that, under the fear and the rationalizing and the imagined conversations with cops and judges, there was something even worse. A flicker of awareness that my delivery was still ticking away in the app. The order in my car was getting colder. The timer was counting down toward late, toward a bad rating, toward lost money. The fact that that even registered at a time like this made me want to throw up. I hated myself for letting that thought into the room. I tried to shove it out, but it kept pushing its shoulder against the door. 30 minutes late could get a complaint. Enough complaints add up. If my account got flagged, that was rent, groceries, child support. I stood there, phone heavy in my hand, the screen slowly dimming, and then going dark as it waited for me to decide what kind of person I was. In the middle of that paralysis, another sound rose up to become the center of the world. At first it was small, easy to miss between the tick of the hazards and my own ragged breathing. A soft tap on the road somewhere near the front of the car. Then another. Then another. Tap, tap, tap. I looked down, half expecting to see blood dripping onto the asphalt in some dramatic, undeniable pattern. Instead, I saw a tiny line of clear droplets falling from somewhere under the front bumper, catching the headlight and becoming bright beads before they hit the ground and spread into small, dark spots. Condensation from the engine, probably, or water knocked loose from some puddle, totally normal. But the rhythm of it, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, slid uncomfortably into the spaces between the hazard ticks, like the noises were communicating behind my back. Tick, tap, tick, tap. I swallowed, throat dry, thumb finally settling on the last one. Whatever my fear was doing to my head, I knew the part where a person lay on the road in front of my car was real. I forced air into my lungs, lifted the phone, and started to dial. I never finished. From the left side of the road, across the lane, somewhere deeper in the woods where my headlights could not reach, something ripped through the quiet. It was a scream, high-pitched and raw enough that it sounded like it scraped the bark off the trees as it passed. Not an animal, not a branch cracking, not someone joking. Every cell in my body knew that immediately. It was too shaped, too full of terror. Help! The word was stretched out, jagged at the edges, but unmistakable. A human voice, a female voice, shredding itself on that one syllable. My thumb slipped away from the screen. The phone sagged in my hand. There was a man lying at my feet on the right side of the road. And now, on the left, out in the dark tangle of trunks and fog, someone else was screaming for help. For a second after that scream, my whole body forgot how to move. I jerked upright, knees creaking, phone still clutched in my hand, and just stood there in the middle of the lane, staring into the black wall of trees beyond my headlights like they might open up and show me a face. Help! It came again, a little weaker this time, like whoever was shouting had turned their head, or like the sound was being dragged backward through the woods away from me. Same voice, same pitch. Definitely a woman, or a teenage girl, but thinner now, stretched, the sound cut off mid-breath, like someone had covered her mouth. I turned my head to the right, down toward the man lying by my tire. The hood still shadowed most of his face. He had not moved at all. The way his arm was twisted made my stomach clench. If there was any life left in him, he was not using it to call for help. The phone screen in my hand had gone dark again, reflecting a warped little picture of my own face. My eyes wide, my mouth hanging open. The numbers 911 waited on the keypad under my thumb like a dare. I looked from that ghost of myself to the body at my feet, then back to the trees where the scream had come from. It felt, in that moment, like the night had split neatly into two problems and dropped them at my feet. One on the road, bleeding or broken or already gone. One somewhere in the tangle of trunks and fog, loud enough and alive enough to rip their throat on that single word. The universe, or whatever passes for it on a road like this, had decided to ask me a question I was not prepared to answer. The obvious logic came first, clumsy and desperate. Maybe the guy you hit is already gone. The thought tasted like rust. Maybe there is nothing you can do for him now. But whoever is screaming might still be breathing, might still be moving, might still have a chance if you get to them fast enough. A different angle followed, uglier, but no less persistent. Maybe they were together. Maybe this is some kind of fight gone wrong, or a mugging, or something worse, and the one you hit is the one who started it. Maybe the one in the woods is his victim. Maybe the best way to make up for what just happened is to help the one you did not run over with your car. I hated how much sense that made. The scream did not come a third time. That somehow made it worse. The silence that settled in after it was not the normal quiet of the woods. It felt waiting. "Sir, I'm going to. I'll be right back," I muttered to the man on the asphalt, as if he could hear me and would understand that I was not abandoning him completely, just temporarily. The words sounded ridiculous the second they left my mouth. I backed away from him, toward the center line, then turned and moved slowly across the lane to the left shoulder, toward the side the scream had come from. The beam of the headlight still covered the first few feet beyond the road, turning the nearest underbrush into a harsh tangle of lit branches and harsh shadows. After that, it was just darkness. The gravel under my shoes thinned out to damp leaves and packed dirt. At the very edge of the asphalt, the ground sloped down slightly, slick with a film of moisture and fallen foliage. My shoe slipped and skidded half an inch, and my heart stuttered like I had fallen into a pit instead of almost losing my footing. I reached out and grabbed the rough bark of a tree trunk to steady myself, my fingertips scraping moss. I realized then that I was still holding my phone like dead weight. I thumbed it awake and, without thinking too hard about the lack of signal, swiped up the flashlight. A small, harsh, white circle burst into existence on the ground in front of me, washing out the colors of the leaves and making the shadows beyond them look even blacker. I stepped off the road and into the first line of trees. The flashlight beam cut through the fog that hovered low to the ground, turning it into streaks and blobs that shifted when I moved my hand. The light caught on spider webs strung between thin branches, making them flare up silver and then disappear. The trunks of the closer trees were suddenly right there, rough bark and patches of lichen, details I had never wanted to see this closely on old quarry. Hello. My voice sounded too loud in my own ears, even though I had not meant to shout. Ma'am, are you hurt? The scream did not repeat. Instead, the woods answered with smaller noises. To my right, something moved through the leaves, a soft, sliding rustle that could have been an animal, or a person crawling, or just the wind playing tricks. Ahead of me, a branch snapped, a quick, sharp crack that bounced between the trunks before falling flat. My own breathing was suddenly the dominant sound. I could hear every inhale, every shaky exhale, even the tiny whine at the back of my throat when I realized how loud I was being. I tried to pull the air in slower, quieter, like that would somehow make me less visible to whatever else was listening. The phone's light made a tight little world, no more than a few steps in any direction. Beyond that, everything was suggestion and absence. I took another step, the leaves squelching softly under my shoe. The fog seemed thicker between the trees, clinging to my jeans, catching the beam in weird floating patterns. Where are you? I called, a little softer now. I heard you. Can you call out again? The words drifted into the dark. For a few seconds, nothing came back except the normal noises of a night that had decided I was uninteresting. A faint chirp from something buried in the undergrowth, the distant whisper of wind higher up in the branches, the quiet tick of cooling metal from my car behind me. Then, from somewhere deeper in the trees, past where my light could reach, a voice answered. It used my words. Where are you? Same sentence, same rhythm, as if someone had taken my question, run it through some low-quality recording app, and played it back with just enough delay to make my skin crawl. The pitch was wrong. Too flat in places, rising on the last syllable a little more than I had, almost like a mocking echo. The tone, too, had this off quality, like whoever spoke did not really understand how humans stack emotion into design. It did not sound like the woman who had screamed. It did not sound like anyone I wanted to meet. My stomach turned to ice. Every little rationalization I had been building, that maybe I was running towards someone who needed me, that maybe I could balance the scales of what had just happened on the road, cracked right down the middle. There was nothing natural about that repetition. That wasn't some injured person calling out for a second time. That wasn't even someone trying to answer me. That was someone playing with me. In that instant, standing just a few feet off Old Quarry Road, phone light trembling on damp leaves and rough bark, I understood, on a level deeper than thought, that whatever was out there in the dark was not just a victim looking for help. The way that voice copied mine hollowed something out inside my chest. It felt like standing at the edge of a well and hearing your own words come back up a second later, not as an echo, but as someone else's idea of what you sound like. For a second, my body was ready to bolt. Every sane part of me screamed to get back to the solid rectangle of asphalt, to the open space where at least I knew what direction the danger was in. My heel even started to pivot toward the road. Then the guilt hit again, sharp and sour. What if there is actually someone hurt out here? My mind scrambled for excuses to keep me moving forward. What if the voice messing with you is separate from them? What if they are lying 5 feet further in, bleeding, while you run back to the car because you did not like the tone of one sentence? I told myself, stupidly, stubbornly, that I would go just a little farther, just enough to see if there was a body on the ground, a broken leg, something I could point to later and say, I tried. My world had already tilted once in the last 10 minutes. It was like I was trying to level it by forcing myself into the version where I did not become the kind of person who hears a scream and runs the other way. So I took another step, then another. The trees closed in fast. The ones closest to the road were older, their trunks thick and gnarled. But a few yards in, they thinned out into a crowd of bare, narrow trunks, like a cluster of teenagers standing too close together. Low brush clung to the ground, brittle stems, patches of weeds, some kind of thorny vine that caught at my jeans. The ground was uneven, dipped and rose without warning, hiding rocks and old roots just under the leaves. Every step felt like a test for my ankles. The beam of my phone's flashlight bounced as my hand trembled, making the shadows twitch in ways that kept convincing me something was moving just outside the circle of light. When I tilted the beam upward, I could see the underside of branches, black against a sky that was just a darker patch of nothing. The fog that had been hanging low near the road seemed thicker here, clinging in ribbons around the trunks. Every time my foot came down, there was a crunch of leaves and twigs. After I stopped, there was often one extra crunch a second later, just off to one side or behind me. It was soft, close enough to sound like an echo, but not. Echoes do not step on things that you did not. I kept whipping my light around, chasing those phantom footfalls. Each time, the beam landed on more trees, more underbrush, the occasional glossy shine of a wet rock or a tangle of roots, no eyes staring back, no visible figure ducking behind anything, just the feeling of being watched by something patient. In the distance, the headlights from my car still threw a pale tunnel onto the road, but from where I stood, they were just a harsh glow between trunks, like a portal to a safer world I'd stepped away from and might not find again as easily as I thought. The steady tick of the hazard lights had softened into a faint metronome, barely audible under the new sounds of the woods. That was when my flashlight beam slid over something that did not belong. At first, I thought it was just another rock, catching the light wrong. A small metallic rectangle half buried in the leaves, maybe 10 feet ahead, lying at an angle that made one corner shine. I took 2 more cautious steps forward and angled the beam down. It was a cheap flip phone, the kind that looked old even 10 years ago. Black casing, screen cracked, hinge slightly askew. It was lying face down in the leaf litter, just far enough from the road that someone would have had to walk in here deliberately to drop it. I stared at it for a long second, some part of my brain whispering that it might as well be a snake coiled there. But another part, the one still clinging to normal explanations, said, "People carry phones. Someone screaming for help might have dropped theirs." I crouched slowly, knees protesting, and reached for it. The leaves crinkled under my weight. My fingers closed around the plastic. It was cold and slightly damp, gritty with dirt along the edges. I flipped it over gently. The screen was black, the cracks spreading out like a spider web. When I ran my thumb over the side where the power button should be, nothing happened. No light, no vibration, dead. The thing that bothered me most was not that it was here. It was where it was. From where I knelt, I could look back through the gap between tree trunks and see my car's headlights in a straight line. If you traced it like a shot, it went from the beam, across the lane, through this exact spot, deeper into the woods. The phone was positioned almost perfectly in that path, like a marker or an invitation, like bait. I turned the phone over in my hand, half hoping to see a sticker or a case that might tell me more. There was nothing. Just scuffed plastic, hairline fractures in the hinge, dirt ground into the seams. It could have been here for days. It could have been here for an hour. "Ma'am?" I called again, voice tighter than I wanted. "Are you hurt?" The woods swallowed my words differently this time. Instead of bouncing back in weird mimicry, they just absorbed them. The silence that followed was almost complete. Almost. Way off in the dark, in a direction I could not pin down, there was a sound, a faint, wet coughing, like someone trying to clear water out of their throat. The timbre was wrong for an animal, but it was too far away, too muffled by trees to be sure. It came once, then again, then faded into what might have been the rustle of branches. I swung the flashlight toward where I thought the sound had come from, but the beam hit nothing but more trunks and fog. No movement. No figure slumped against a tree. Just my own breathing getting louder in my ears. Every instinct I had left was screaming now. "You have gone far enough." The car suddenly felt very far away. The man lying on the asphalt felt like he belonged to another timeline. Here, in this damp strip of forest, it was just me, the dead weight of the flip phone in my hand, and noises that did not fit any pattern I could live with. I started to straighten up, decision finally tipping toward retreat. No matter who was out there, I was not equipped to go on a rescue mission in the dark with nothing but my phone light and whatever courage was left rattling around in my ribs. I could go back to the car, try 911 again, maybe drive to a better signal, and send people with flashlights and radios and guns to handle whatever this was. I turned toward the road, the headlights a pale anchor between the trees, and took a step. The flip phone in my hand, the one with the dead black screen, made a sound. It was tiny, but in the quiet, it might as well have been a gunshot. A soft electronic chirp, the kind you hear when an old device boots up or receives a text. The phone vibrated once, a weak, rattling tremor in my fingers. The screen stayed dark. No sudden glow, no logo, no backlight. Then from its dead speaker, barely louder than a whisper, a distorted female voice spilled out. The sound was wrong, pitched slightly too low and crackling with static, like a message played off a tape that had been left too close to a magnet. "Help me," it said. Just those two words, drawn out in a way that made them sound almost mechanical, like someone had practiced them too many times. Then there was a tiny, soft click, the same noise you hear when someone closes a clamshell, and the phone went completely still in my hand again. No light, no vibration, just cold plastic. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it might come up into my throat. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Every hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood up at once. That was it for my noble intentions. Whatever thin thread of rational adventure had pulled me off the road snapped clean. I did not gently set the phone down. I dropped it, hand flinching away like I had been burned. It landed face down in the leaves with a dull little thud, half disappearing back into the forest floor like it had never been there. Then I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my arms and shoulders. The ground grabbed at my shoes, slick and uneven, trying to pull me down. The flashlight beam jerked wildly across trunks and fog, and my own panicked breath, making everything strobe. Behind me, I thought I heard something move, a heavier step, a rush of leaves, but I did not look back. The only thing I aimed for was the hard, flat gray of the road between the trees and the pulsing orange of my hazard lights waiting for me like a frantic heartbeat at the edge of the frame. The sprint back toward the road did not feel like running so much as falling forward over and over. The undergrowth clawed at my legs, thorny stems scraping my jeans, branches slapping my face with damp leaves that left cold streaks on my skin. Every breath tore in and out of my lungs like I was inhaling straight fog. The beam of my phone flashlight jerked wildly, catching flashes of bark, exposed roots, and empty air that my brain kept trying to turn into hands. Somewhere behind me, the sound of my own flight seemed to wake the woods up. Leaves rustled in places I was not stepping. Something heavier than a rabbit crashed once through the brush off to my right, then went still. Every crack and crunch collapsed into the same single thought pounding in my skull. Too far in. You went too far in. Through all that chaos, the headlights of my car stayed fixed ahead of me between the trunks, growing larger with every desperate step. The twin beams looked almost gentle from this distance, a warm, artificial glow in a sea of black and gray. As I got closer, they began to feel like two eyes, watching the spot where I had disappeared, waiting to see if I would make it back. The uneven ground flattened out slightly as I neared the tree line, and the branches thinned. The road's gray surface glowed faintly in the spill of the headlights, and the orange pulse of the hazard lights painted brief slashes of color against the closest trunks. I forced myself to slow down just before I broke out of the woods. Some survival instinct kicked in. Running full tilt into an open space you cannot fully see is a good way to meet the wrong end of a bumper or a branch. My feet skidded a little as I dug my heels in, leaves sliding under my soles. I caught myself with a hand against a tree, bark biting into my palm. For a moment, I just stood there, chest heaving, trying to drag my breathing back under control. My heart was slamming against my ribs, threatening to drown out every other sound. I told myself that if I could just calm down enough to think clearly, this would resolve into something explainable. A broken phone, some kids messing around, my own nerves running ahead of me. The flashlight in my hand was still on. The beam pointed down at the ground by my shoes. I lifted it slowly, forcing myself to sweep it one last time through the trees behind me, just to prove there was nothing there. The light slid over trunks, brush, empty gaps. Then it hit someone. At first, all I saw was a hand, pale fingers curling around the edge of a thick tree trunk maybe 10 yards away, the skin catching the light while the rest of the body stayed hidden behind the bark. The knuckles were slightly bent, the grip relaxed, like someone casually leaning out from behind cover. Then the beam shifted half an inch, and I saw more. A slice of black fabric hugging a shoulder, a hoodie, same color and texture as the one on the man by my tire. A hint of chest, the curve of a jaw, and, between the edge of the tree and the shadow of the hood, one eye. It was just barely visible, peering around the trunk at me, pupil blown wide in the dark, the white catching enough of my light to gleam. I froze. My arm locked in place, the flashlight beam pinning that fraction of a face like a spotlight. The rest of him was still hidden, like he was using the tree as a curtain, and had only peeked out just enough to let me know he was there. For a second, we just stared at each other. Or rather, I stared, and that one visible eye watched. It did not squint or blink or flinch in the bright light. It just stayed fixed on me, unbroken. "Did you call for help?" I forced out, my voice cracking halfway through the sentence. It felt like the stupidest question in the world, even as I asked it. But my mouth did not know what else to do. The figure did not move. No answering shout, no groan, no shuffle of feet. The hand on the bark did not tighten or slip. The hoodie did not shift. The eye, that tiny human detail, stayed pointed directly at me like the barrel of a gun. In the space between us, the sounds of the road seeped back into my awareness. The hazard lights ticked in their steady rhythm, faint but insistent. Tick, tick, tick. Each one flashed orange across the trunks in the corner of my vision, lighting the edge of the road. Above us, a soft, high-pitched whine of wind threaded through the branches, making them rub against each other with a dry whisper. A few leaves rattled loose and skittered down, catching the light like falling scraps of paper. Neither of those sounds belonged to the figure behind the tree. What did was the tiny chuckle that slipped out next. It was so soft I might have missed it if I had been moving. A small, breathy sound that rode the air on a hint of amusement, not a full laugh, not a cartoon villain cackle, just a little exhale with a smile behind it, like someone had just heard a joke they were not supposed to enjoy as much as they did. My spine went cold. Whatever faint hope I had been nurturing, that this was some injured hiker, some lost camper, anyone who could be filed under normal person in a bad situation, evaporated. People do not chuckle like that when they are genuinely terrified. They scream. They sob. They plead. They do not stand behind trees and breathe laughter at strangers. The figure moved for the first time. It was not a big step out into the open, like I had half braced for. Instead, the head tilted slightly to one side, a slow, thoughtful motion, reminding me terribly of the way a dog cocks its head at a sound it does not quite understand. The hoodie's shadow shifted over the upper part of the face, but that one visible eye stayed locked on me, tracking my every twitch. As his body adjusted around the trunk, my light caught on something at his waist. A brief glint, a sliver of reflected white. It could have been a belt buckle, could have been a clip on a pocket knife, could have been something worse. Whatever it was, my brain filled in every option at once. I realized that I was standing halfway between the road and this person, rooted in place, while the man I had hit, lay alone by my car. The flip phone in the leaves behind me felt like it was still buzzing, even though I had dropped it. The voice that had mimicked me earlier, the scream, the recorded whisper, all of it stacked up and rearranged itself into a pattern where I was not the hunter or the rescuer or the unlucky driver. I was the center of a circle I had not seen forming. Something shifted behind me. It was subtle, almost lost under the wind and my own blood in my ears, but different enough that my whole body snapped to attention. A footstep, but not on leaves this time. On something harder, flatter. A soul contacting asphalt. Then another step, slow, deliberate. The kind of walk people do when they know they are being heard and do not care. The sound came from the direction of the road, near where I had left my car door open. The realization hit like a bucket of ice water. Whoever was behind that tree might not be alone. While I stood here locked in a staring contest with this one, someone else could be right now at my car. Closer to the ignition. Closer to the man on the ground. Closer to the only piece of metal I had to hide inside. The figure beside the tree did not react to the footsteps. He did not look toward the road. He did not break his gaze. It was like the sounds behind me were part of the plan, a cue in a script he had already rehearsed. I did not wait to see what his next line was. Self-preservation finally overrode everything else. The guilt, the curiosity, the stupid, stubborn urge to be the kind of person who helps. All of it got shoved aside by the image of someone sliding into my driver's seat while I stood here, flashlight pointed at the wrong threat. Without another word, I turned and plunged back toward the road, forcing my way through the last thin barrier of underbrush. Branches scratched at my arms and hooked at my jacket, as if the trees themselves were trying to hold me back for the show. I ripped free, shoes hitting the lip of the asphalt harder than I meant to, momentum nearly spilling me onto my knees. The hazard lights flared bright around me as I stumbled out into the lane, throwing my elongated shadow across the hood of my car. And I realized I was about to find out whether I was too late. I burst out of the trees like something had thrown me. 1 second, there were branches clawing at my jacket and wet leaves sliding under my shoes, and the next, my foot hit the sharp edge of the asphalt. I slipped hard, momentum carrying me forward. My knees buckled, and I went down on one hand, palm scraping gritty road, the phone's flashlight swinging wild arcs before I clamped down on it. When I pushed myself up, gasping, my car was right there in front of me. The hazards were still blinking, orange pulses slicing through the dark, answering the pounding in my chest in an offbeat rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Something was wrong. It hit me in pieces, not all at once. First, the driver's door. I had left it mostly closed, pulled in tight against the frame when I stepped out. Now, it was wide open, yawning into the night like a missing tooth. The dome light inside glowed soft yellow, spilling a pool of weak light onto the asphalt and up the inside of the door. It made the interior look smaller than usual, like a little stage with the curtains pulled back. Second, the space by the front passenger side tire, the spot where the man had been lying, the empty spot. He was gone. For a fraction of a second, my brain tried to fill the gap like you do on a bad photo, overlaying the shape that should be there. The twisted arm, the hood, the pale cheek turned away. But reality did not cooperate. There was just flattened grass at the edge of the shoulder, a faint smear on the damp asphalt that could have been dirt or something else, and nothing else. No body. No trail. Panic did not come as a scream in my head. It came as a sudden hollowing, like someone had sucked the air out of my chest. I spun in place so fast I almost lost my footing again, searching the ditch, the edge of the woods, the other side of the road. Did he crawl away? That was the first thing I wanted to believe, that somehow, after lying so still, he had dragged himself to safety. But there were no smears leading outward, no bent plants, no dragging mark in the leaves. Is someone dragging him now? My eyes skimmed the tree line, looking for the shape of two figures instead of one, for the hitch of shared weight, for anything that would let me tell myself this was a rescue and not something worse. The woods looked exactly as they had when I ran in, dense and indifferent, except for the crushed plants and broken twigs marking the path I had made. Nothing else looked disturbed. Nothing else looked kind. The night had gone back to being stingy with its sounds. No more screams. No mocking repetitions of my own voice. Whatever chuckled behind the tree had fallen silent. All that was left was the hazard tick, steady and maddening, echoing off the guardrail. Somewhere high up and far away, an owl called once, a drawn-out note that made the hairs on my arms try to rise again. Underneath those was a noise I did not notice right away because it blended so easily with my own anxiety. A faint creak from my car, the subtle shift and sigh of old suspension, the sound it makes when weight settles or redistributes. That was the moment the floor dropped out from under whatever shaky moral ground I'd been standing on. Up until then, I had been telling myself a story where I was still a good Samaritan in a bad situation. Someone who had made mistakes, but was trying to do the right thing. Now, with the man gone, the door open, and my car making noises like something had just moved inside it, I stopped thinking like a potential hero and started thinking like prey. I would like to say I went to check under the car to see if he had rolled further than I thought, that I knelt to look for a pulse in the dirt, called out to the man whose body I had just hit, tried to make sure he had not somehow pulled himself to the shoulder and collapsed. I did none of that. Instead, I stayed low, instinctively dropping into a half crouch, like making myself smaller would make me less interesting to whatever was watching. My body angled itself toward the open driver's door, while my eyes kept flicking to the tree line, expecting any second to see the figure from behind the tree step out into the spill of the headlights. I edged closer to the car in small, jerky steps, every muscle coiled, ready to run or fling myself inside. The dome light made the interior look strangely cozy from the outside, like a living room lamp left on. But there was a wrongness to it now. In the glow, I could see the front seats, the steering wheel, the scattered napkins on the floor, the top pizza box still wedged against the dash. The back seat was a darker pool beyond that, shapes stacked on shapes, delivery bags, my hoodie, headrests, all blending together into a single shadow. The creak came again, not loud, just enough that I knew it was not my imagination. A tiny e-unk from the rear suspension, like the car was reacting to a shifted load. Hello? The word came out of me without permission, barely above a whisper. Is someone there? No answer. From the open door, just at the edge of the light, another sound floated out. Almost absurdly mundane. A soft plastic rustle, the subtle crinkle you hear when someone's hand brushes against a bag. Not the dramatic tearing of a wrapper, not the clatter of glass, just a little adjustment, a touch. It came from the back seat area. I could not see clearly from where I stood near the front. The angle of the dome light threw most of the rear bench into shadow. All I could make out was the suggestion of bulks, edges, fabric. It would have taken 2 steps, maybe 3, to lean in, turn, and look. To once and for all answer the question forming like ice in my skull. Am I alone in this car? I didn't take those steps. Something in me, the same part that had yanked me out of the woods the second the phone whispered, made a terrified decision. It said, if you do not know for sure, you can still leave. If you know for sure, and you are right, you might never leave at all. So I didn't look. I moved closer to the door, staying sideways, arms stretched out like I was reaching toward a nervous dog. My fingers curled around the outside edge of the door frame, careful not to step any closer than I had to. I pressed against the cold metal, and with a sharp shove, slammed the door shut from the outside. The sound cracked through the night like a gunshot, bouncing off the trees. The dome light snapped off at the same instant, plunging the interior into darkness. For one heartbeat, the car was just a black shape with blinking orange corners, and my own reflection flickered in the driver's side window. Wide eyes, tight jaw, phone still clenched in one hand. Whatever was in the backseat, if there was anything, was now sealed in with my delivery bags and hoodie. That should have made it worse. Somehow, it made it easier to lie to myself. I could pretend the rustle had been the pizza settling, the bags giving way, the car cooling. On that lie, I moved. I bolted around the front of the car, shoes scraping on the pavement, the headlights momentarily blinding me as I passed through their beams. My hand found the passenger side handle, yanked the door open, and I dived into the seat head first, twisting my body awkwardly to swing my legs in after me. As soon as I was inside, I slapped the lock button on my key fob. All 4 locks thunked down in unison, a small mechanical chorus that felt like the only spell I knew. I jabbed the shift into drive with more force than was necessary, my foot already pressing the gas. I did not check the mirror. I did not look over my shoulder. I aimed my eyes at the strip of road in front of me, at the way the headlights caught the cracked asphalt, and told myself that I was alone in the car, that the weight I thought I felt behind me was just paranoia and supplies, that the sense of someone breathing the same air a few feet from the back of my neck was just leftover terror from the woods. As the tires bit into the road and the car began to move, one thought cut louder than all the others, sharp and shameful. I had left a man on that road. Maybe alive, maybe not. And I was driving away without making sure which. The first second after I threw the car into drive, the tires just spun. The engine revved higher than I meant it to, a panicked snarl under the hood, and for an instant we went nowhere. The old Honda shuddered, the front end lifting a fraction of an inch as the wheels fought for grip on the damp, cracked asphalt. Then they caught. The car lurched forward, jerking my head back against the headrest. The hazard lights cut off when I hit the turn signal. Orange blinking, replaced by the steady white of the headlights, pointed down the narrow slit of road ahead. The trees on either side immediately began their strange, strobe-lit march past the windows, trunks flaring bright for a fraction of a second, then vanishing into black behind me. It felt less like I was driving away from something, and more like the woods were sliding past to reveal whatever was waiting next. My chest was a compressing vice. Every inhale felt too shallow. I kept one hand locked on the steering wheel at 10 o'clock, knuckles pale, and the other hovering uselessly near the gear shift, as if I might need to slam it into reverse, or park, or anything else at a moment's notice. The part of my brain that still liked to pretend it was in charge scrambled to lay a rug over what I had just done. If he was alive enough to crawl away, he is alive enough to call for help. That sentence sat itself in the front row, smug and insistent. If he got up while you were in the woods, he had options. Hitch a ride with someone else, call 911, flag down a car. He is not your responsibility anymore. You tried. Another thought layered itself under that, sour and thin. Maybe he was the one in the woods. Maybe this is all them. The scream, the mimicry, the phone. Maybe they are playing some psycho game, and you just declined to be the prize at the end. The road hummed under the tires. The engine noise settled into a strained, steady note as I pushed the car faster than I usually did on Old Quarry. The speedometer needle climbing past the number I had always told myself was safe. None of those thoughts touched the real center of my fear. Underneath the excuses and the angry justifications, the raw truth was simpler and much uglier. I was afraid to find out if someone was sitting directly behind me, close enough to lean forward and put their mouth by my ear. Inside the car, the soundscape was suddenly everything. With the radio off and the windows sealed, every little noise stood out. The rev of the engine rising and falling with my foot, the faint rattle of old plastic panels in the dash, the occasional creak from the seat springs when I shifted my weight. The delivery bags behind me, stacked on the rear bench and the floor, had their own vocabulary, a quiet crinkle of insulated material, a soft thud when something settled. I could not tell which noises were normal and which were new. A tiny squeak behind my right shoulder. Was that the upholstery aging, or the subtle adjustment of someone's leg? A faint scuff under the rear window. Bag sliding, or a shoe? Every sound came with two possible labels, and my brain slapped the safer one on as fast as it could, like a parent throwing blankets over something their kid should not see. I did one other thing I am not proud of. As soon as the car was pointed straight and steady, I reached up and tilted the rearview mirror with my fingers, just enough that it no longer showed the back seat at all. Only the small rectangle of the rear windshield and the dark road stretching behind me. If anything moved directly behind my head, I had decided I did not want to see it like that. Small, framed, undeniable. From then on, every time my eyes flicked up to the mirror, all I got was the dim glow of my own taillights on the road and the occasional looming shape of a tree trunk when I passed too close to the shoulder. The shadowy hump where the bag sat remained a rumor somewhere below its line of sight. "You're being ridiculous," I whispered, though the words were aimed at the air in front of me, not at whoever might or might not be breathing behind my seat. "It's just the bags, just the hoodie. You loaded them yourself." Old Quarry began, mercifully, to change its face. It started small. A single street sign reflecting bright white in the distance, warning of an upcoming junction. Then the suggestion of a wider world beyond the trees. A bit more open space between trunks. A faint glow on the horizon where another road cut across. The first real sign that I was leaving the road's chokehold was a lone street light hanging over a crossroad. Its cone of yellow light dropped onto fresh pavement and a new set of painted lines. As I approached, the forest pulled back a few yards on either side, like it was reluctant to give me up. Passing under that light felt like slipping out from under a hand. My shoulders loosened a fraction. My foot eased back on the gas just enough to let the engine relax a little. I did not, however, loosen my grip on the wheel. My fingers stayed locked, tendons aching, as if the car might leap off the road and back into the trees if I let up. A few minutes later, 8, the app would later tell me, though it felt like a year, a gas station sign appeared ahead, its red and blue logo bleeding into the fog like a beacon from another reality. The lot around it was mostly empty, but the bright floodlights made the pumps and concrete look almost painfully real. Beyond that, on the other side of the main road, I could see the softer glows of residential streetlights, the first hints of the suburb I was supposed to be heading toward this whole time. Civilization, such as it was, did what it always does. It dulled some edges. The idea that I might stop and throw the doors open in a pool of gas station light flashed through my mind. I pictured attendants, security cameras, other cars, witnesses, places where, if something came crawling out of my back seat, I would not be the only one to see it. I did not pull in. Every time the thought started to solidify, another image overlapped it. Me slamming on the brakes, leaning over the back seat in a lit lot, yanking bags aside until I was bent at an angle that would make it very easy for someone to put something sharp into the side of my neck. The parking lot seemed suddenly less like safety and more like a box with lights on it, so I stayed on the road, following the navigation voice's calm instructions as if nothing about my reality had shifted. Turn left in half a mile. Continue straight. Turn right. The app sounded just as confident as it had on the empty forest road. As the houses started to appear, one here, then another, their porch lights like little islands, part of me did relax. The world was filling back up with other people, other cars, other stories that had nothing to do with mine. Somewhere in one of those houses, my customer was probably checking their phone, wondering why their pizza was taking so long. The sheer mundanity of that made the horror feel almost like a dream I had driven out of. Almost. By the time I reached the first stop sign on the edge of the suburb, the road had widened, lanes marked cleanly, sidewalks hugging the sides. I rolled up to the line and let the car settle. The engine dropped to a low idle, vibrating through the steering wheel. For the first time since I left Old Quarry, I came fully to a stop. Behind me, tires hissed on wet pavement. I glanced at the mirror and saw a pair of headlights crest the small rise and come up fast, then slow, then tuck in neatly behind my bumper. The familiar feeling of another car's presence should have been comforting. Instead, my throat went dry. The new car's lights flooded the inside of my Honda from behind, cutting through the rear window, over the headrests, across the ceiling. For a second, the interior of my car was lit not by my own weak dome light, but by this harsh, clean glow from an outside source. I made the mistake of looking, not at the mirror, but at the reflection in my windshield. The glass in front of me turned into a dim, ghostly screen, showing a faint overlay of what was behind me. In that pale double image, just for a heartbeat, I saw the outline of a head in the back seat. Not a clear face, not detail, just the rounded shape of a skull where no headrest sat. Exactly where a passenger's head would be if they were sitting behind me, centered in the wash of light. A darker lump against the lighter gray, with a suggestion of shoulders beneath it. My breath locked. Every muscle in my back went rigid. I blinked, hard. The next instant, the reflection shifted, and it was just the stack of delivery bags again, their top corners arranged in a way that could look like a head if you wanted it to. The other car's headlights flared a little as the driver adjusted their angle, and the illusion broke completely. I sat there, foot hovering over the gas, pulse pounding in my ears, and told myself, with what I hoped sounded like conviction, that it had always only been the bags. The turn into the neighborhood should have been the moment everything unclenched. I signaled right, eased off the main road, and let the car roll onto a smooth, freshly paved street lined with cookie-cutter houses. The sudden order of it was almost jarring after the chaos of Old Quarry. Each driveway cut a neat bite into the curb. Each lawn was trimmed into the same polite rectangle. Porch lights glowed in soft yellows and whites, some framed by seasonal decorations. A blown-up ghost still deflated on one lawn from the last holiday. A pumpkin-printed flag flapping lazily in someone's yard. A wreath of fake autumn leaves hanging crooked on a door. The street wound gently, bending into curves that ended in small cul-de-sacs with landscaped islands in the middle. House numbers were stenciled cleanly on mailboxes and glowing from little solar lamps staked into the grass near the edge of each driveway. It was the kind of subdivision they use in commercials when they want you to think safe and normal and middle class. My phone screen, now more glaring than ever, showed I was only a few turns away. I followed the blue line through a left, then a right, passing a minivan parked half up on a curb, a pickup with a tool rack, a compact sedan with a baby sunshade still stuck in its back window. Kids' bikes lay on a front lawn, one wheel spinning slowly in the cool breeze. I slowed as I started checking mailbox numbers, squinting to read them in the glow of my headlights and the occasional yard lamp. 214, 218, 222. The app's tiny map showed the pin dropping somewhere near the end of the street, where it curved into another small loop. Their house was almost exactly what I expected. A 2-story place with beige siding and dark shutters. An attached garage on the right with a white door that had fake windows painted on the top row. A single light over the front door spilled a steady golden rectangle onto the steps and the first few feet of the walkway. On the door itself, hanging dead center, was a wreath of orange and red leaves that looked like it had been picked out of a catalog for autumn charm. Beside the handle, at about chest height, a Ring doorbell glowed a small, piercing blue circle. Its fisheye camera pointed out like a glass eye. I pulled up to the curb across from the house and let the car idle. The engine's low vibration buzzed up through the seat into my ribs. My headlights washed the front of their lawn, making the grass look a little too bright, the shadows a little too sharp. For a few seconds, I just stared at their front door, watching the light above it burn steady. I tried to tell myself this was just another delivery. A late one, sure, but nothing that would be remembered tomorrow. I imagined the person inside, some tired parent maybe, or a couple on their couch, wondering if they should call the place and complain, but mostly just wanting to eat and go to bed. I told myself that world was the real one, not the one on Old Quarry, not the woods. This one, with trash cans neatly lined up by garages and porch lights on timers. My hands did not seem convinced. They were still shaking as I reached over and grabbed the stack of food from the passenger seat. The warm cardboard of the pizza box pressed into my fingers, the plastic handles of the bag digging into my knuckles. The smell of cheese and sauce rushed up at me when I shifted them, almost violently normal. I flicked the interior lock on my door, heard it thunk up, and used my shoulder to push it open slowly, like I was afraid it might be held from the outside. Cooler air washed in, carrying that familiar suburban night mix. A hint of cut grass, someone's laundry vent blowing out warmed fabric softener, the faint smell of a grill long since shut off. When I swung one leg out and put my foot on the pavement, I could have sworn the car rocked slightly in the opposite direction. Just a tiny sway, like weight shifting on the rear axle. It was subtle enough that I could pretend it was just the natural movement of a body exiting the driver's seat, but my nerves did not buy it. My brain immediately superimposed an image of someone adjusting their position directly behind me as I got out. From somewhere over my shoulder, behind the headrest, I heard a faint plastic crinkle. The same kind of noise I had heard when I was standing outside the open door on Old Quarry, a bag being brushed by a hand or settling. I did not check. Every muscle in my neck screamed to turn, to glance back in through the open door and either put my fear to rest or confirm it forever. I kept my eyes locked on the sidewalk instead, on the lit rectangle of the porch, on the stupid safety of a front door with a wreath and a doorbell camera. I stepped fully out, careful not to jostle the car with my hip, and nudged the door, mostly closed, with my elbow, leaving it just shy of clicking shut. The engine stayed idling. The dashboard lights glowed in my peripheral vision. The car's interior, from this angle, was mostly just shadow and suggestion. The sounds of the suburb washed over me as I started up the sidewalk. Somewhere, a few houses away, a dog barked twice, bored and half-hearted, then fell quiet. From an open upstairs window across the street, I could hear the muffled rise and fall of a television, the canned laughter of some sitcom track bleeding into the night. The constant low hum of central air units rolled along the row of houses, compressors kicking on and off with soft thumps. All of it felt fragile and thin, like a wallpaper someone had pasted hastily over the rotting boards of what I had just driven through. A pleasant noise layer, sure, but underneath, I could still feel the empty road, the scream, that chuckle behind the tree. The world had not reset just because the zip code changed. My shoes clicked softly on the concrete as I moved up the drive, the food warm and solid in my hands. I could see my reflection, faint and warped, in the Ring camera's glass eye as I approached. For one insane second, I wondered if it had captured anything when I pulled up. If somewhere on a server, there would be footage of my car idling at the curb with something moving in the back seat behind me. I was halfway up the driveway when I heard it. The chirp. The exact familiar double beep my car made when I hit the lock button on my key fob. Only my hand was wrapped around paper handles and cardboard, not plastic. I had not touched the fob. The sound came from behind me, back at the curb. I stopped dead. The hair on the back of my neck tried to crawl off my skin. For a heartbeat, the whole neighborhood seemed to hold its breath with me. The dog stopped barking. The TV laugh track dipped into a commercial. Even the air conditioner hum seemed to fall one notch quieter. Slowly, like my head was turning through syrup, I looked back over my shoulder. My car sat where I'd left it, nose pointed down the street, parking lights glowing faintly. All 4 locks were down now. I could see the little metal tabs flush with the door panels. The interior looked dark, the dome light off, no shape obviously leaning out or pressed against the glass. But as I watched, the rear window on the driver's side caught a glint from the porch light. In that faint shine, for just a second, I saw something move. It was not big, just a shift of darkness within darkness, like a head shape lifting slightly into view, inches below the glass, then dropping back out of sight the moment my eyes landed on it. No clear features, no eyes, just the silhouette bump of a skull, rising where the top of a seat should be, then smoothing away. My fingers tightened on the food bags so hard the plastic handles bit through my skin. I stared for one more heartbeat, willing the shape to resolve into nothing but the outline of my hoodie or the curve of a pizza bag. The window stayed stubbornly black, reflecting only the golden smear of the porch light and the small blue ring of the doorbell behind me. I turned back toward the house because there was nothing else to do. I walked the rest of the way up the path on legs that did not feel entirely connected to me, every step away from the car, a choice I did not want to be making. Somewhere in that sealed, locked shell of metal and glass behind me, something had just made itself comfortable. The front porch felt like a stage I had wandered onto mid-scene. I climbed the last 2 steps, the boards creaking slightly under my weight, and stepped into the rectangle of light spilling from the fixture over the door. The warmth of it on my face did not reach anything inside me. I set the pizza box and bags down carefully on the welcome mat, making sure the logo faced the door out of sheer habit. My hand hovered for a second over the Ring doorbell, the little blue circle glowing up at me. It was such a cheerful, harmless bit of tech, a tiny plastic eye that saw everything and understood none of it. I pressed it. From inside, I heard the faint chime it played, that bright little tune it uses to announce that there is someone at the door. Footsteps followed almost immediately. Soft, cushioned thumps across carpet, a scuff on tile, the jingle of a lock turning. The door opened inward, and normalcy washed over me like a smell from an old life. The woman standing there looked like she had stepped out of a commercial for relaxing at home after a long work week. Yoga pants, a loose hoodie, hair pulled up into a messy bun that was probably less accidental than it looked. There were faint lines around her eyes that suggested she laughed more often than she frowned. But tonight, she just looked tired in an honest way, not haunted. Her smile when she saw the food was practiced, the polite customer service smile people give back without thinking. But there was something genuinely grateful under it. Behind her, I could see into the living room. A flat-screen TV played something with the volume turned way down. A crime show, maybe? Or a drama. The flicker of changing scenes painting the walls in soft colors. A row of family photos marched along the staircase wall. Kids in soccer uniforms, a couple on a beach somewhere, a dog with a bandana. On the coffee table, a candle burned steadily, throwing out a warm puddle of light and a faint smell of vanilla that reached all the way to the door. "Hey," she said, exhaling like she had been holding her breath all day and only just remembered to let it go. "Wow, thank you for coming this late. We had a long week." Her voice was conversational, casual, the kind of tone you use with a stranger who is doing you a small kindness. It belonged in this doorway. Mine did not. "No problem," I heard myself say. My throat was tight. The words came out a little thinner than usual, but she did not seem to notice. "Hope it hits the spot." I pulled my phone out with one hand, balancing the food with the other, and brought up the delivery screen. She reached out to take the box and bags, the warmth leaving my fingers as soon as they left my hands. The sudden emptiness made the device feel heavier. She set the food down just inside the hallway, propping the door open with her hip, and reached back to the small table by the wall, where a wallet and a set of keys sat in a dish. "I can tip cash," she said. "That still works, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Cash is great." She flipped open the wallet and pulled out a folded bill without counting it too obviously, then tucked it into the cup holder of my phone case when I held it out. Her fingers brushed mine for a fraction of a second. They were warm, normal, the most human thing I had felt in the last half hour. While she was reaching, I heard it, the soft, familiar idle of my car's engine behind me. It was a sound I knew better than my own voice at this point. The way the motor sat just a little high when it was cold, the faint whoosh of the heater fan that I always had to turn up one more notch in weather like this. Tonight, though, every vibration, every whir felt over-meaningful. My body flinched internally at each little stutter in the idle, like it was a whisper I could not quite interpret. The car sounded occupied. I had never thought of an engine as aware of its passengers before. Now I could not stop thinking about it. The woman finished signing the digital receipt with her finger, the stylus having gone missing long ago. She handed the phone back to me, screen glowing briefly between us. For a moment, our little transaction reached its natural end. "Thank you," she said again, with the practiced finality of someone who has ordered delivery 100 times. "Drive safe." "Yeah," I muttered. "You too." It was a stupid response, but it slipped out on autopilot. My brain was already halfway back at the curb, standing in the dark beside my idling car, the locked doors, the shadow on the rear glass. I turned slightly, angling my body toward the steps, sliding the phone back into my pocket. The porch boards creaked under my heel. That is when she hesitated. Her eyes flicked past me, over my shoulder, toward the street. Her expression shifted, not dramatically. No sudden fear, no widening of pupils, just a small wrinkle of curiosity between her brows, the kind you get when you notice something unusual in a familiar pattern. "Hey," she said, tone light, almost offhand. "Do they let you guys have delivery partners now? That's actually smart, with how late you have to drive." The words hit my back like a physical shove. For a second, I did not understand them. They were in English, sure, but they did not arrange themselves into anything that made sense. I went very still. "What do you mean?" I asked, not turning all the way yet. My voice sounded wrong to my own ears, stretched too thin. She nodded past me, toward the curb, like she was pointing something out in a magazine. There was no tension in her shoulders. She thought she was making small talk. "The guy in your back seat," she said. "He has not moved since you pulled up." Time did that trick again, elongating like warm taffy. In the space of one heartbeat, a dozen images fired through my mind. The man on the road, the empty space by the tire, the hand around the tree, the mimicry in the woods, the dead phone whispering, "Help me," the feeling of the car rocking when I got out, the plastic crinkle, the glint in the rear window. Behind me, the engine idled on, patient, unaware of the way my world had just pivoted around a single sentence. I turned my head. When I turned, it felt like my head was moving through cement. From the porch, under the soft yellow streetlight and the glow from the woman's doorway, I had a clear angle of my car parked at the curb. The Honda sat exactly where I had left it, engine still idling, exhaust curling into the cool air in slow, steady breaths. The front seats were empty shadows. The back seat was not. On the rear passenger side, directly behind where I would sit to drive, there was a silhouette. Someone was sitting upright, their body framed cleanly by the window. The hood of a sweatshirt was pulled up, shadowing most of the head. The head itself was slightly bowed, like the person was looking down at their hands or the floor. I could not see their face. I could see the slope of shoulders under the fabric, too squared, too still. No fidgeting, no natural shifts of balance. Just a single, solid presence in a space that had absolutely no right to be occupied. For a second, everything else in the world dropped out. The house, the woman, the candlelight behind me, all of it blurred at the edges. My vision tunneled down to that shape in my car. My heart, which I had thought was already hammering as hard as it could, kicked into another gear. I could feel it in my throat, in my ears, in my fingertips. My knees went loose, like someone had quietly unscrewed them a few turns. The hand holding my phone went slick with sweat, screen pressing against my palm in a way that felt almost foreign. Every instinct that had been screaming at me on Old Quarry roared back at once. I did not step toward the car. I took a half step backward, closer to the warm rectangle of the doorway, like the frame itself was some kind of line I did not want to cross without a wall at my back. Beside me, I felt rather than saw the woman's expression change. People who have lived long enough to raise kids and pay mortgages know what someone looks like when they see something that should not be there. She tracked my gaze down to the street, then back to my face. The practiced politeness dropped. "Is everything okay?" she asked. The question was simple, but the tone was different now, thinner, coiled. She shifted her weight, one hand going to the collar of her hoodie, pulling it tighter around her neck. Her eyes darted once down the quiet street, as if she was suddenly aware of how few cars were out, how few windows were lit. I did not know how to answer her. No felt too small. I hit a man with my car, and I am pretty sure he is in my back seat now. Seemed like something you do not lead with. The engine's idle sounded louder than it had 2 minutes ago. What had been a low, familiar hum now felt like a growl, a restless clearing of mechanical throat. I could hear the faint vibration rattling something in the front console, a loose coin or a forgotten pen. Each little tremor carried the knowledge that the car was not just a machine anymore in my head. It was a container. As I stared, something tapped. A faint, dull sound from down by the curb. Tap, like a knuckle brushing against glass, or the back of a nail accidentally hitting a window. It came from the side of the car facing us, somewhere around the level of the rear door. It was so soft that if everything had not gone this quiet, I might have missed it. I flinched anyway. The woman did too. Her hand, still curled on the edge of her hoodie, tightened. "Is someone messing with your car?" she asked, voice a notch higher now. My mouth felt dry as paper. "Ma'am," I said quietly, still staring at the silhouette, "I think you should go back inside and lock the door." That got her attention in a different way. She turned fully toward me, eyes searching my face, weighing the seriousness in my tone. Her shoulders squared, some protective instinct kicking in. Behind her, I heard the TV murmur, oblivious. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" she asked. "Do I need to call someone?" The normalcy of the question almost broke me. It was the exact thing you say when a stranger on your porch is clearly not just a stranger on your porch. I tore my eyes away from the car long enough to look at her. "Yes," I said. My voice came out lower than I intended, almost a whisper, but there was no hesitation left in it. "Call 911. She blinked. "Right now?" "Right now," I said. Please, just go inside and call. Tell them there's an intruder in my car. Tell them I hit someone on Old Quarry Road. Tell them—" My words stuttered, jammed together. I did not know how much of the story to unload in that doorway. Something in my face must have convinced her, because whatever follow-up questions she had died on her lips. She nodded once, sharply, and stepped back across the threshold, reaching for her phone on the small table by the wall. I stepped with her, not toward the stairs or deeper into the house, but fully into her entryway, off the porch boards, so there was a solid wall at my back and a door frame like a border between us and the street. I could feel the warmer air of the house now, smell the vanilla candle more clearly. It clashed horribly with the image outside. As I crossed that invisible line, as the woman turned her attention to her phone screen, the silhouette in my back seat moved. It was not a sudden lunge or a dramatic sit-up. It was slow, deliberate. The kind of movement you make when you know you are being watched and want the watcher to see. The head lifted from its bowed position, rising an inch, then another. The hood shadow shifted, and for the first time since I had seen it from the porch, I had the sense of a face turning. It angled not toward the street, not toward the open road ahead, but directly toward the house, toward the open doorway where I now stood. From this angle, under the mixed glow of streetlight and porch light, I could not make out features. All I saw was the front of the hood, the darker oval of a face hidden inside it, pivoting in our direction. The woman had her phone to her ear now, speaking quickly into it, giving the operator her address. I barely heard her words over the sound of my own pulse. Out at the curb, in the back seat of my car, the man I would not turn around to see on Old Quarry Road was finally, unmistakably, looking back. The woman stepped fully inside, and I followed, like I was being reeled in on an invisible line. She shut the door quickly, and without even looking at me for permission, slid the chain lock into place with a sharp, metallic clack that sounded more final than it should have. The soft seal of the deadbolt turning followed a second later. The world outside thinned instantly. The porch light glow bled in around the frame, but the night went from an open space I was standing in to a scene I was now only adjacent to. It should have made me feel safer. It did, in a way. It also made me feel trapped in a different way, like I had just stepped into a box to watch my own car on a screen. She tugged the curtains over the front window, mostly shut, leaving only a narrow gap where the panels did not quite meet. I drifted toward that spot automatically, but stayed just off to the side, like a kid peeking around a doorway in a horror movie, not wanting to be silhouetted in the glass. From that angle, I could see my car at the curb, partial and warped by the reflection of the living room behind me. The engine was still running, a steady little twist of exhaust curling up from the tailpipe and dispersing into the cold air. The silhouette in the back seat had not moved, at least, not that I could see. It was just a darker shape within the dark interior, exactly where a passenger's head should be. My brain kept trying to redraw it as piled bags, as a jacket, as anything else. My skin refused to be convinced. Behind me, the woman was already on the phone. "Yeah, hi. I need the police," she said, voice surprisingly steady. "I think there's someone in this delivery driver's car. He says it's not his partner." She shot me a quick glance, confirming the "not" part. I heard the 911 operator on the other end, distant and tinny. Calm, practiced questions. "Is anyone injured? Are they trying to get into the house?" Can you see any weapons?" The woman relayed what she knew, which was almost nothing. "He says he hit someone on the road," she murmured, pacing a small circle near the entryway table. "On Old Quarry. I don't know if it's the same person. No, he's just sitting in the back seat. No, he's not gotten out. No, I don't see a weapon. We're inside my house now. The door's locked." She kept saying "he" for me and "he" for the man in the car, and the pronouns slid around in my head like oil on water. I stood there, listening to someone else describe my life like a problem for dispatch, feeling exposed and useless and embarrassed all at once. This was not how I imagined myself if anything like this ever happened. In the private movie where you rehearse disasters, you are braver. You take control. You walk up to the car, yank the door open, drag the intruder out, whatever. You do not slink into a stranger's hallway and let a yoga pants mom handle the phone call while you hide by a curtain. The house around me hummed with a different kind of life. The refrigerator in the kitchen, just out of sight, was making a low, steady sound, a kind of background white noise. As I stood there, it kicked off with a subtle thunk, and the sudden absence of that hum made the room feel oddly hollow. In the next room over, the TV was still on, the announcer's voice muted to a gentle murmur, talking about plot points in a fictional story while a real one unfolded in the entryway. A wall clock above the doorway to the living room ticked off seconds with tiny, precise clicks. Each one landed in my ears like a small accusation. Outside, filtered through the wall and glass, the engine sound of my Honda was a constant presence, low and patient, like the thing in the back seat was breathing through it. Every few seconds, a soft wind gusted up the street, making something on a neighbor's porch rattle, a plastic Halloween decoration that had overstayed its season, a ghost or pumpkin on a flimsy stake clacking lightly against the siding. The sound was so cheap and hollow, it made everything feel even more surreal. I pressed 2 fingers lightly against the curtain and pulled it open another inch, just enough to check again. The view had not changed. Car, curb, headlights reflecting faintly off the neighbor's minivan. The shape in the back seat sitting perfectly still pointed toward the house. A wave of shame hit me so hard, I actually stepped back from the window. I had driven all the way here like this. From the moment I pulled away from that empty stretch of Old Quarry Road until I turned onto this cul-de-sac of family photos and candles, I had done it with someone, or something, in my car, behind me, within arm's reach, and I had not turned around once because I was too afraid to know. In some selfish, twisted way, the fear of confirming it had outweighed every other rational concern. The fear of that first direct eye contact was bigger than the fear of being hurt, bigger than the fear of what the cops would say, bigger than everything. I thought about my daughter, and the image that came was not one of her now, sleeping under cartoon sheets. It was of her in a few years, in her own car, driving alone at night, her little car seat replaced by a real seat, a backpack on the floor, music on the radio, someone lifting themselves up in her rearview mirror. The idea made my stomach flip. For a second, I had to close my eyes and swallow hard, because if I went too deep into that mental hallway, I was going to fall apart in this woman's entryway. "Sir?" I opened my eyes. The woman was looking at me, her phone still to her ear. "They're asking if you saw a weapon," she said, "or if he said anything. Did you talk to him?" "On the road," I managed. My voice sounded small in the warm air. "He didn't answer. I think I hit him with my car. He was just there, in the middle of the road. I swear I didn't see him until... The words jammed up again. I stopped before I said, until it was too late. I did not want to hear myself say that aloud. She nodded slowly, repeating pieces of that to the dispatcher, leaving out the worst of my self-recriminations. "No, he's not trying to get in," she said. "He's just sitting there." "Yes, we're inside." "Yes, the door is locked." "How long?" Okay, thank you." She hung up and let her hand drop, staring at her own phone like it was something she did not quite recognize. "They said officers are on their way," she told me. "They're not far. Just stay inside." I nodded, because what else was there to do? Go back out and knock on my own car window? As if summoned by that thought, my own phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound made me jump. For one irrational second, I pictured a text from whoever was in the car. Something simple like niece house. I pulled it out with a hand that did not feel quite steady and glanced down. It was not a text. It was a notification from the delivery app, popping up cheerful and oblivious across the top of the screen. "How was your delivery? Rate your experience." My thumb hovered over it. Some reflex I did not understand made me tap the banner. The app opened to the post-delivery screen, bright and clean, with big buttons for star ratings and a tip confirmation I had already processed. At the top of the screen was a tiny map thumbnail, the kind you barely notice most nights. Just a little rectangle showing where the last drop-off had happened. A blue arrow for my car on a stylized grid of streets. Where the arrow was, there was also a second smaller dot just behind it. Not a restaurant, not a house, just a gray circle with a faint label under it. Unknown device. I stared at it, breath caught halfway up my throat. For maybe half a second, the labels hovered there, overlapping. The blue arrow tagged with my name, the little dot sitting almost on top of it, riding my route. Then the app glitched. The thumbnail flickered, the second dot vanished, and the map zoomed out slightly, as if it was redrawing the entire area. When it finished refreshing, it was just my car icon near the cul-de-sac, blinking innocently. No tag, no extra device. I stood in a stranger's hallway, listening to my own car, idle outside with something sitting in its back seat, and looked down at the screen that ran my life. For a second, it had admitted I was not alone. The siren started as a thin, distant wail, just barely cutting through the hum of the neighborhood and the muffled TV. At first, it was hard to tell which direction they were coming from. The sound bounced off the houses, slipped in through the walls in waves. Then it grew clearer, closer, rising in pitch as it approached, until it felt like it was aimed directly at this quiet little street. My heart tried to sync up with it, beating faster with every block they closed. The woman and I stood near the front window, both of us instinctively leaning toward that thin gap in the curtains. She had turned off the entryway light at the dispatcher's suggestion to avoid backlighting yourselves. So we watched the world outside from a dim hallway, our faces reflected faintly on the glass. The siren cut off abruptly. A second later, red and blue lights swept across the houses, strobing over siding and shutters, splashing across her living room walls in flickering bands. The family photos on the staircase suddenly looked like stills from a crime scene. A patrol car rolled slowly into view, stopping at an angle a few yards behind my Honda. Another pulled in from the far end of the cul-de-sac, parking further back, blocking the exit, like this was a perimeter and not just a pizza delivery gone wrong. 2 officers stepped out of the closest car. Both of them moved with the kind of care that says, "We have done this before, and sometimes it goes badly." Their flashlights snapped on in quick, bright cones. Hands rested close to their holstered weapons, not gripping yet, but not relaxed either. Beside me, the woman's breath went shallow. Mine felt lodged halfway up my throat. We watched as they approached my car, boots making dull thumps on the pavement we could not quite hear through the glass. The nearest streetlight and their cruiser spots threw enough light on the scene that the Honda looked almost overexposed. My exhaust still curled up in lazy, pale ribbons. One officer reached the driver's side door and tried the handle. I had locked it. I knew I had. I remembered the sound, the thunk under my thumb, the way the tabs had dropped. The door opened. Just a smooth pull. No resistance, no click of a lock being popped. It swung outward like it had been waiting to be used, the dome light blooming on inside. Even from the house, I could recognize that little detail. The officer did not react to it, just leaned in. Flashlight beam washing over the front seats, the steering wheel, the center console. I could see the pies stacked on the floor now, sagging in their boxes, and my hoodie crumpled where I had left it behind the passenger seat. The second officer circled around to the rear door, his flashlight trained on the glass, trying to cut through the reflections. He opened that door too, with no sign of resistance, and swept his beam across the back seat, up to the ceiling, then down to the floor. I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for the moment everything would burst. The shout, the scramble, the orders barked over radios. I was braced to see a shape jerk up from the bench, hands raised, or worse, lunging. Nothing happened. The officer at the rear door paused, then straightened. He turned his head slightly toward the house and gave a small, barely perceptible shake of his head. The woman beside me covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. The officer at the front door closed it gently, then gestured toward the house, motioning us out. I felt the woman's eyes on me, waiting to see if I would go. My legs were not interested, but they moved anyway. We unhooked the chain, cracked the door, and stepped out together, the cold air slapping my overheated skin. The world outside felt sharper under the patrol lights, like someone had turned up the contrast. Walking across her front lawn toward my car, I felt the weird sensation that the entire universe had shrunk down to the patch of driveway and street where my Honda sat. The rest of the neighborhood, all those other houses, silent and dark, was just painted backdrop. The closer I got, the more I saw ordinary details I had not been able to perceive from the window. The way condensation was beating along the edges of the glass, the little smears of dirt on the bumper from the road, the faint print of a hand on the rear passenger window that matched no one's, but I could not prove that. The first officer, a man in his 40s, with tired eyes and a jaw that looked permanently clenched, stepped forward to intercept me. His flashlight beam dropped from my face to my chest, then down to my hands, checking for anything he did not like. Satisfied, he angled it away, letting the red and blue take over the cast on my skin. "Mark?" he asked, confirming my name from the dispatcher notes. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from behind me somewhere. "I'm Officer Keller. This is Officer Ruiz." He gestured back toward his partner, the one still standing by the open rear door. We took a look. "There's no one in your vehicle right now." The words landed like stones in my gut. "Did you check the back?" I asked, even though I had watched them do exactly that. There was someone sitting there. She saw him too. I jerked my head toward the woman, who nodded quickly. Officer Keller's face did not change much, but something in his eyes softened, just a fraction. Sympathetic or wary, I could not tell. All the doors were closed when we pulled up, he said. No one inside. No footprints around the car except yours and mine. That's not possible, I said, louder than I meant. He was just there, right there. He has been in my car since the road. My words started to tangle. Behind my ribs, panic and shame wrestled for position again. Keller's radio crackled on his shoulder, a burst of static and distant chatter from some other call. He turned his head slightly, listening, then pressed the mic button with 2 fingers. Unit 12, on scene, he said. Vehicle clear so far. Stand by. The antiseptic calm of his voice made everything feel unreal, like I had stumbled onto an episode of someone else's life. Look, I said, forcing the story out in chunks. I was on Old Quarry. Someone, a man, ran into the road. I hit him. I swear to God I did. He was lying by my tire. Then something screamed in the woods. I went to check, and when I came back, he was gone. My car door was open. I heard things in the back seat. I drove here and I pointed at the woman again. She saw him, sitting right there behind me. She asked if we're allowed to have partners. You can ask her. Officer Ruiz, who had been mostly silent so far, gave the woman a brief look. She met it head on. I saw someone, she said firmly. I thought he worked with him. He was in the back seat when he pulled up, hoodie on. He never moved, but I saw him. Ruiz nodded once, then turned back to the car. We're not saying you didn't see anybody, he said evenly. We're saying that right now, there's no one inside. As if to prove the point, he opened the rear passenger door wider and shone his flashlight in again, the beam washing over the gray upholstery. From where I stood, I could see the delivery bags on the bench. My hoodie slumped beside them, a couple of napkins and a water bottle on the floor. Nothing else. No knees, no shoes, no hand resting on the seat. Ruiz's light slid down to the floorboard behind the driver's seat and stopped. Hold up, he murmured. His posture changed, tightening. He bent a little closer, the beam sharpening. Then he reached into his belt for a pair of blue nitrile gloves, snapping them on with a practiced flick of his wrists. My throat went bone dry. What is it? I asked. He did not answer right away. Carefully, using only his gloved fingertips, he reached down and picked something up from the rear floor, just where someone's heels would rest if they were sitting there. It was a folding knife. Even in the stutter of red and blue, I could see the dull sheen of the metal handle, the textured grip, the hinge half locked open. The blade was not fully extended, stuck at a steep angle, but there was enough to see its shape and the dark residue clinging to it in uneven smears. Not fresh, wet red, nothing so obvious. But something had stained it long enough ago to dry into a dark crust along the edge and near the joint. Ruiz held it up, the flashlight beam catching on the metal. He turned it slightly, examining the length, the condition, the place where fingers would have wrapped around it. Then he glanced over the top of the door at me. This was right where your passenger would have had his feet, he said quietly. The world tightened to a pinpoint. The forest, the impact, the scream, the mimicry, the chuckle, the phone whispering, "Help me," the silhouette in my mirror, the movement in the rear window. All of it collapsed into that one small object, dangling from a gloved hand in the beam of a cop's flashlight. I stared at the knife, my voice gone, knowing two things with absolute clarity. Whoever had been in my back seat had not come to share a ride, and whatever road they had been on with me, it was not done yet. If this were the kind of story people comment fake under, this is where it would pivot into something satisfying. The cops would pull security footage from some hidden camera on Old Quarry. They would find a blurry still of the man in the hoodie stepping out from the trees. They would connect the knife to some unsolved case 3 towns over. There would be a name, a mugshot, maybe even a motive. That is not what happened. What did happen was paperwork. I spent the next hour on that woman's couch, a half-finished candle still burning on her table, while Officer Keller and Officer Ruiz took my statement over and over. They wanted details, but only certain kinds. "Start from the beginning," Keller said, pen hovering over his notebook, "from when you first saw him on the road." I told them again about Old Quarry Road, about the narrow asphalt, the trees, the way he had come out of nowhere from the right. I talked about the hoodie, the glimpse of a pale face, the impact, the sound, the jolt. "Speed?" he asked. 35, maybe 40, I said. "Had you been drinking at all tonight?" "No." "Any drugs? Prescription? Recreational?" "No." He made a non-committal noise, the kind that says, "I have to ask," and people lie at the same time. I tried to tell them about the scream in the woods, about the voice mimicking mine, the flip phone whispering, "Help me." I watched their faces closely when I did. Ruiz's eyes flickered once, but he did not write much of that down. Keller's pen slowed almost to a stop. "Could it have been an animal?" he asked when I mentioned the scream. "Animals don't yell help," I said. He did not argue, but the look he gave me said he had already filed that detail under stress reaction. Yalmayur. I told them about the delivery app glitch, the ghost order near Old Quarry weeks before, the unknown device dot that had appeared next to my car just before the map refreshed. Keller wrote "phone issue" in the margin and moved on. The only detail that seemed to hold their attention was the knife. "Not yours?" Ruiz asked, turning it over in the evidence bag with his gloved fingers. "No," I said. "I've never seen it before." He nodded slightly, like that matched whatever they already thought. At one point, they stepped into the kitchen to talk quietly with the woman, giving her their card, promising extra patrols in the area for a while. I sat alone in her living room, staring at the TV I could not really see, listening to the muted commercials and the tick of her wall clock. My car sat at the curb outside, now dark and silent, doors closed properly, like it had never drawn breath and invited anything in. When they came back, Keller handed me a copy of a form, a case number written at the top. "We're going to send a unit out to Old Quarry," he said. "We'll take a look along that stretch, see if we can find any sign of an accident, skid marks, blood, clothing, anything. We'll also get the knife processed. If it's linked to anything, we'll know." "What about him?" I asked. "The man. If you find him? If we find someone injured, we'll let you know," he said. "If we find a body, we'll definitely let you know." He said it so matter-of-factly that for a second, I felt like I had stepped sideways into someone else's conversation. They offered me a ride home. I took it. I left the Honda where it was for the night, like it needed to cool off in more ways than one. Sitting in the back of their cruiser, hands folded, listening to the soft burble of their radio, I wondered if the man in the hoodie was riding along with us, sitting between the beeps and crackles. A couple days later, Keller called. His voice over the phone sounded exactly like it had in the entryway. Steady, tired, not unkind. We had units run Old Quarry, he said, multiple times. We even went a little wider than the stretch you described. And? I asked. No fresh skid marks, he said. No blood on the road. No torn clothing on the shoulder. Ditches are clear. No one in the brush. We talked to the county. No reports of any pedestrian collisions last night or this morning. Nothing from hospitals about someone matching your description, walking in hurt. I griped the phone tighter. I know what I felt, I said. I know what I heard. I'm not saying you didn't feel an impact, he replied. Sometimes debris can do that. Fallen branch, trash bags, a deer that runs off. At night, that can play tricks on your head. It wasn't debris, I said. There was a man by my tire. I touched his shoulder. He exhaled. Even saying it out loud made me feel crazy. There was a pause on the line. As for the knife, he went on, lab says there were traces of blood on it. Old enough that we can't say when it got there. No fingerprints worth anything. We ran the DNA we could salvage. No match in the system. So it's been used, I said. Looks that way, he said. We also checked recent missing persons reports. Nobody in the county, or the next one over, matches what you told us about the hoodie guy. No one vanished from their car tonight. No one never arrived home from a walk on Old Quarry. As far as our paperwork is concerned, there's no one to tie him to. So what does that mean? I asked. He sighed, long and quiet. It means we have an unnamed, unconnected weapon found in your backseat, a stretch of road with no physical evidence, and 2 witnesses who saw someone in your car who isn't there now. That's not nothing. But it's also not enough to build a case on. I wanted him to say more, to say they believed me, that they were going to keep digging, that this had tripped some switch on an unsolved file somewhere. He did not. After that, life did what it does. It moved on, at least on the surface. The delivery app had no idea any of this had happened. A day after I told the pizza place I needed a week off, it sent me a cheerful notification. Earn more this weekend. Boosted pay after midnight on Friday. 2 days later, we miss you on the road, Mark. New quests available in your area. The pizza place manager texted twice to say they were short-staffed, to remind me that Friday and Saturday tips are insane right now if you can power through. At one point, he joked, haunted by carbs, not ghosts, right? With a laughing emoji. I stared at that for a long time. People kept ordering late-night food. Cars from other services kept drifting down side streets. Rooftop lights glowing. Drivers' faces lit bluish by the same app I used. If I had not told anyone, the whole night could have folded itself neatly into the gap between one shift and the next without leaving so much as a crease. Inside my head, nothing folded up clean. The sound that gets me now is not sirens or screams. It is the tick of hazard lights. Anytime I pass a car on the shoulder, blinkers pulsing orange into the dark, everything in me tightens. I imagine someone standing in front of their bumper, hand over their mouth, staring at the road. I imagine someone lying just out of headlight range. I imagine a back seat with a shadow that looks too much like a sitting person when another car's headlights hit it just right. Sometimes, when I'm stuck in traffic and hazard lights start blinking a few cars ahead, I realize my fingers have curled into the steering wheel so hard they hurt. A week after my statement, Keller called again. His tone was different this time, a little more clinical, like he was reading from a list he did not quite want to share. "I'm going to tell you something my supervisor asked me to pass along," he said. "Off the record, okay?" "Okay," I said. "Given that we didn't find anything on Old Quarry," he said slowly, "one theory is that you may have hit something else. Debris, maybe an animal that ran off. In your panic, with the fog, the late hour, it's not unheard of for people to misinterpret events, to fill in blanks, especially when they're already under a lot of stress." "You're saying I hallucinated this," I said. "I'm saying," he replied, "that your brain might have tried to make sense of a scary situation by constructing a narrative. Impact, guilt, fear, dark woods. It can do weird things. That doesn't mean you're crazy. It means you're human." For half a second, just half, I wanted to believe him. It would have been so much easier if this had all been some stress-induced breakdown. If I could blame the scream on the wind, the mimicry on echo, the phone on a glitch, the silhouette on my own delivery bags. If the knife in the back seat was some lost thing someone dropped weeks ago, and I had only just noticed it. But even as that relief rose up, it hit something it could not move past. The memory of the woman on the porch, her eyes sliding past me toward the curb, her voice casual and genuinely puzzled when she asked, "Do they let you guys have delivery partners now?" She had seen him too. Before I said anything, before I was shaking in her hallway, before I had a chance to infect her with my version of the story. Whatever my brain might be capable of, hers had started that night clean. She had done yoga, watched TV, lit a candle, waited for a pizza. And when she looked out at my car, she saw the same thing I did. A man in the back seat who did not belong there. The cops could suggest all the other possibilities they wanted. Old Quarry could scrub itself of skid marks and blood. The system could refuse to give the knife a name. But every time I try to tell myself it was all in my head, I hear her voice again, soft and puzzled, describing someone who never needed that road at all to get where he was going. I lasted 3 more days after that night. I did one more short shift, then another, both of them strictly on the main roads, ignoring every suggestion the app made to shave off time. Each ping made my chest tighten. Each fastest route banner felt like bait. On the 3rd night, I was sitting in the parking lot behind the pizza place, engine off, phone in my hand, an order waiting on the screen. It was an easy run, 10 minutes, tops. Good tip area, no woods, no Old Quarry. I watched the countdown clock tick away my acceptance time, thumb hovering over the accept button. For a second, I even convinced myself I was going to press it, that all of this could be shoved into a corner of my brain and buried under more miles, more late-night shifts, more cardboard boxes and Ring doorbells and normal interactions. Instead, I hit log out. 2 days later, I officially quit delivery work. I told the manager some half-true story about needing a steadier schedule, something more compatible with my custody arrangement. He frowned, made a few noises about how I was one of his best night drivers, then shrugged. There is always one more person willing to drive after midnight. I picked up a day shift job instead. Warehouse, fluorescent lights, forklifts, the kind of work where the loudest sound is a pallet jack squeaking, not hazard lights ticking. I bought a different car a month after that, telling myself I needed better gas mileage, The truth is, no matter how many times the detail guys at the car wash ran a vacuum over the Honda's back seat, I could not look at it without seeing a shape that was not there anymore. The new car smelled like plastic and factory air. The seats were clean. There were no stains on the floor, no mystery crumbs, no knife found under a mat. None of that mattered. The habit was already carved into me. Now, every time I walk up to my car, any car, I always check the back seat before I get in. Always. In rain, in blazing sun, in the kind of cold that makes your fingers hurt. Arms full of groceries, fast food, mail. It does not matter. I never go straight to the driver's door anymore. Instead, I've built myself a little script. I walk up, hit unlock, and go to the rear door first, opening it like I am just going to toss my bag in. I lean in, look around casually, hand brushing the seat, fingers checking the footwell. If anyone ever watches me, it probably looks like I am just disorganized, like I always keep things in the back. Really, I am confirming that the space is empty, that the fabric is just fabric, that there are only floor mats where someone's heels could be, only my hoodie balled up where a knee should be. The apartment lot has its own ritual. Every night, I pull in between the same white lines, the same oil stain darkening the concrete. I kill the engine, sit for a second, while the last song on the radio dies out, then hit the key fob. The chirp of the lock is as familiar now as my own microwave beep. When I open the door, the dome light flicks on, yellow and stark. For a split second, it throws my reflection on the rear window. Every time, I have to fight the urge not to slam the door and walk away. So I do the same thing. I walk around, open the rear door like I've forgotten something, and look in. My neighbors probably think I lose my wallet or my lunchbox a lot. They do not know I am counting heads that are not there. It is not just my car anymore. In parking lots, I sometimes catch myself scanning other people's back seats as they roll past under the sodium lamps. A sedan glides by, interior dark except for the glow of a phone in the driver's hand. And in the back, I see the outline of someone sitting where a child's seat should be, or where a pile of coats actually is. An SUV turns on its blinker, and for a second, the rear side window reveals a lump that could be a duffel bag or a crouched shape. I know logically that most of what I am seeing is just shadows and junk. People carry their lives in their cars, jackets, gym bags, boxes they have not brought inside yet. My brain, however, fills in the rest. It draws the back of a head on top of those shapes, sketches a neck, adds the memory of a hood. Technology did not help. Every so often, my phone still throws out random notifications I do not remember asking for. Traffic is light near your usual route. Heavy congestion near Old Quarry Road. Sometimes, late at night, I will get a map thumbnail showing a little arrow crawling along a familiar line of highway, trying to help me get home faster. Most of the time, I swipe them away without opening them. I tell myself they are just the app's ghosts, old habits stored in some server, trying to coax me back into a version of my life that does not exist anymore. Then there was the night it was 1:17 a.m., the same timestamp at the top of this document as I write, and I was sitting on my couch, laptop open, trying to finally get this story out. My phone buzzed. It was a map notification. Without thinking, I tapped it. The screen opened to a tiny live map, blue and gray lines representing roads near my town. One car icon moved along a road highlighted faintly green. The label at the bottom said, Old Quarry Yard, 8 mile faster. The time in the corner read 1:17 a.m. The car icon was dead center on the stretch of road where I remember hitting him. I watched it creep along for 3-4 breaths. No name attached to it. No driver initial. Just an arrow, moving steadily through the trees. I hit the power button so hard the screen went black under my thumb. I told myself it was a glitch. Some leftover, last known route artifact. Later, when my hands stopped shaking, I turned the phone back on. The notification was gone. There was no record of it in my history. The sounds from that night have their own loop in my head now. Sometimes they play in order, sometimes they overlap, but the sequence is always the same. The hiss of tires on cracked asphalt, the thump against the front of the car, the scrape along the side, the scream from the woods, ripping through the quiet, the crunch of leaves under my shoes as I stepped off the road, the mimicked, "Where are you?" coming back at me in my own cadence, the faint tap on glass near the back seat window, the tick of hazard lights counting out my hesitation, the crackle of police radio as Keller checked in with dispatch, the tiny metallic clink the knife made when Ruiz set it down into the evidence tray. They play when I am stuck in traffic. They play when I am brushing my teeth. They play when my daughter falls asleep in the back seat and I check the mirror one extra time just to see her breathing. The worst part is, the sounds do not always stay in my head. Sometimes they come back in the world. A few months ago, I had convinced myself I was doing better. Therapy, daylight, routines. I went to a grocery store after work. The most ordinary outing imaginable. Fluorescent lighting, kids crying in aisles, carts with one bad wheel. I loaded my bags into the trunk just after sunset. The sky a fading purple behind the strip mall. The lot was not empty, but it was not crowded either. A couple of cars sat a few spaces over. Someone's music thumping quietly from a cracked open window. I hit the unlock button on my fob out of habit, even though the car was already open. As I reached for the handle of the driver's door, I heard it. 3 gentle knocks on the back of my car. Not a bang. Not a fist. Just tap, 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 right on the trunk, in the exact rhythm of someone politely announcing themselves on a door they think you should open. I froze, hand hovering an inch from the handle. The sounds from that night lined up behind this new one like a backing chorus. Hazard tick, scream, knife clink, tap on glass. Slowly, I turned. There was no one standing behind my car, no one crouched by the bumper, nothing tall enough or close enough to have made that sound. I went back into the store, palms slick, and asked the bored kid at customer service if they could check security footage for my row. I did not tell him why, just said I thought someone might have been messing with my car. He humored me. We stood together in a tiny back office that smelled like toner and burnt coffee, watching grainy black and white footage of the parking lot from 10 minutes earlier. We watched me load my bags, shut the trunk, stand by the driver's door. On screen, I flinched and turned my head at the exact moment I remembered the knocks. Behind my car, in that footage, there was nothing. No person, no animal, no passing cart, not even a shopping bag caught by the wind. Just the empty space where someone had just told me, very politely, that they were still there. The cursor blinks at me like it is impatient. Just that little line appearing and disappearing at the end of this paragraph on my laptop screen is enough to pull me out of the memory spiral and dump me back into the present. I sit in the shallow light of my desk lamp, in a room that is technically safe, listening to the building around me. Remember, it is a building. The AC unit in the wall has been humming for the last hour. A steady, dull roar that I stopped hearing 10 minutes into writing. Now, without warning, it clicks and shuts off, and the silence that rushes in behind it is so sudden it feels almost physical, like someone has opened a door to a vacuum. In that silence, I hear every other sound more clearly. The fridge in the kitchenette gives a soft internal pop and goes quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's door closes. Then their deadbolt slides home. A car starts out in the lot below my window and reverses, tires crunching over loose gravel. The glow from my laptop is the only real light in the room now. It throws blue on my hands, my forearms, the chipped surface of the desk. My eyes sting. I do not know how many letters in this document I have rewritten, how many sentences I have backspaced through when they sounded too dramatic or not dramatic enough. It has been months, closer to a year, if I am honest, since I quit delivery. I have told pieces of this story exactly twice in that time. Once to a therapist who asked more about my childhood than about the knife, and once to Keller, who had a form to fill. This is the first time I have tried to lay the entire thing out, start to finish, with no one interrupting to ask, "Are you sure?" Or, "Could it have been?" The building is quiet. The clock on my microwave reads 1:17 a.m., the same timestamp that keeps cropping up whether I want it to or not. There is one more thing I have not put down yet. It happened a few months after Old Quarry, after the porch, after the knife. Long enough that I had stopped flinching every time someone used the word road in a sentence. Not long enough for my backseat ritual to feel optional. I had to drive to a neighboring town around lunchtime to pick up something for work, a part they did not have in stock locally. It was a clear day, blue sky, sun bright enough to make me squint when it flashed off windshields. I got into my new car like a person who has rehearsed every entry for an audience. Rear door first, check the seat, check the floor, close it, then the driver's door. For a while, it was easy to pretend I was just another daytime commuter. Radio on low, traffic moderate, kids' backpacks bobbing at crosswalks. The kind of outing you forget as soon as you get home. Then I made the mistake of opening the GPS app. I typed in the address, hit enter, and let the synthetic voice calculate my fate. The screen lit up with a route, bright blue, and I watched the estimated time tick down as it did the math. Almost immediately, it suggested Old Quarry Road. Not by name at first, just as the most efficient route, 10 minutes faster, highlighted in smug green. When I tapped the route details, the label appeared in that small, unbothered font, Old Quarry Ard. It was still in there, in whatever memory bank the app uses for roads this user has survived before. I stared at the map for a long second, then hit Options and toggled Avoid Unpaved Roads, even though Old Quarry is technically paved. It did not change much. The app still offered it as the best choice, voice chirpy and indifferent. In 1.2 miles, turn right onto Old Quarry Road. I'm not doing that, I said out loud, to no one. So I didn't. I took the long way. I stayed on the main highway, stuck with the slower traffic, watched my ETA climb, accepted it. Every time the voice told me to turn, and it would have taken me closer to that stretch of trees, I ignored it and waited for the recalculating tone. For the most part, that worked. But the town I was headed to sat in a way that made Old Quarry a kind of hinge. Even avoiding it, there was one major intersection where my route and that road's entrance shared some asphalt. I realized too late where I was when I saw the sign. Old Quarry. Erd. White letters on a green background, the metal pole slightly bent from some long-ago storm. The mouth of the road opened to my right, a narrow strip of gray asphalt disappearing quickly under the arches of trees. In the daylight, it looked smaller than it had that night, less like a portal and more like a side street someone forgot to widen. There were no cars turning in, no one coming out, just empty pavement, tree trunks, and the shadowed suggestion of a ditch. I told myself not to look. Of course I looked. As I passed the entrance, my eyes flicked right. It took maybe half a second, long enough to register that there was nothing there, no drifting fog, no shape in the road, no figure standing at the edge of the trees, just sunlight hitting the first few feet of cracked asphalt and then vanishing into shade. And then, in the car, behind me, I heard it. A soft chuckle. Not loud, not theatrical, not the kind of laugh you hear from the next table at a bar. It was the exact same sound I had heard in the woods that night when I locked eyes with the figure behind the tree. A small exhale with a smile tucked inside it, like someone had just watched something play out exactly the way they hoped it would. It came from the space directly behind my seat. Every muscle in my back clenched. My hands jerked on the wheel. I checked my blind spot so fast I almost drifted. The rational part of my brain started screaming over the irrational part. Air in the vents. Seat creak. Road noise, bouncing weirdly off something. Anything but that. I swallowed, forced my eyes up to the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. No hood, no head. Just my daughter's empty booster seat on one side, my work bag on the floor, a jacket crumpled in the corner. As I watched, the dome light flickered once. Just a tiny blink, less than a second. It came on without being fully on, then went back to its off state. No doors were open. No sensors had been tripped. The dash did not show anything. The chuckle did not repeat. I did the errand. I drove home. I parked in my usual spot. I checked the back seat before I got out, and again when I got back in to move the car closer to the building. I have not driven past Old Quarry's mouth again since. I plan my routes manually now. I do not trust the app's suggestions. I do not even like looking at that part of the map. Which brings me back to this chair, this desk, this blinking cursor at 1:17 a.m. I am not sending this story to you for advice. I am not asking whether you believe me, or hoping that some internet stranger will connect it to a case they heard about on the news. I am not expecting you to solve it, or to tell me that it was all in my head and I should get more sleep. I am sending it because I want there to be a record somewhere outside my own brain that this happened. That on a normal Friday night, a tired delivery driver in a beat-up car hit someone who should not have been in the road at all. Heard a scream that might have been a plea or might have been bait. Walked into the woods after it, even when the woods answered back with his own voice. Drove someone or something to a quiet suburban street. Watched a woman open her door for a pizza and listened as she casually mentioned the man in his back seat he had been too afraid to turn around and look at. Sat in a stranger's hallway while cops shone lights into his car and pulled a knife off the floor where a pair of feet should have been, and has not gotten into a vehicle the same way since. If you are listening to this on your phone, maybe through your car speakers while you drive home from work, do me a favor. When the episode ends, before you put the car in park, check your rearview mirror. Really look. Not the quick flick you do to make sure a cop is not behind you. The kind of look where your brain has to accept what it sees. If you are already in bed, lights off, headphones in, just think about how many times you have slid into your car in the dark without really glancing into the back. All the times you have tossed your bag in, started the engine, and trusted that nothing else had been waiting for you in that little pocket of space. I do not think he ever really needed that road. Old Quarry could disappear tomorrow under fresh pavement or get blocked off for construction, and I do not think it would matter to him. What he needed, what he still seems to need, is someone who will not turn around. Someone who will feel the impact, hear the scream, notice the weight shift, sense the presence, and decide that not knowing is safer than knowing. That used to be me. I reach the end of this document, read the last few lines twice, then drag the mouse to highlight it all. I copy it into an email window addressed to a horror channel I have listened to for years. The kind that reads stories like this in a calm voice over footage of empty roads and dashboard cameras. I type a subject line, something simple like, "The man I drove to your house." My finger hovers over the send button. For a beat, the apartment is perfectly still. Then my phone, lying face down beside the laptop, buzzes. I flip it over, expecting a spam email or a weather alert. It is neither. It is a random GPS notification, one of those helpful suggestions the system coughs up on its own. New faster route found. Old Quarry Road. Below the text is a tiny map, thumbnail size. A pulsing arrow blinks at the end of the path, the route line ending not at some random point in the county, but right over the intersection next to my apartment complex. The arrow is pointed straight at my building. The cursor on my laptop blinks one more time. Then I hit send,